Sold. $310. Ruth Calder's gavel came down, and for one strange second Jonah Mercer felt the old workbench return to him. Not as an inheritance, not as an apology. As Lot 37, plus a 15% buyer's premium. An hour later, he and Luis were dragging it sideways toward the open loading door when Jonah saw the walnut sideboard waiting against the wall with a yellow auction sticker on its drawer. He stopped so suddenly the bench rolled into Luis's shin. "Man, that isn't theirs," Jonah said. Across the room, bidders were gathering around the next row of furniture. Grant stood beside the auction clerk, smiling in the exhausted way of a man finally getting rid of a burden. Jonah crossed the floor and pulled open the sideboard's top drawer. It sagged left, exactly as it had the last time Eileen Park brought it into Walter's shop. Ruth saw his face. "Problem? This belongs to somebody." Grant's smile vanished. "Don't start." Jonah pointed toward the bench he had just spent his rent money buying back from his own family. A narrow walnut runner was still clamped beneath its top. Ruth looked at the sideboard, then at Grant. She raised the gavel, but did not strike it. "Nobody bids on anything," she called. "The sale is stopped." Grant turned to Jonah. "What did you do?" 3 hours earlier, Jonah had been sitting in his pickup across the street, trying to decide whether humiliation counted as a legitimate reason to stay in the truck. Rain dotted the windshield without committing to becoming weather. Beyond it, Mercer Furniture Repair looked smaller than it had in his memory. The brick front was the same tired red, and the painted sign above the windows still leaned slightly to the right. Mercer Furniture Repair. Chairs, tables, cabinets, honest work. Walter had added honest work after a customer accused him of replacing a mahogany chair rung with stained maple. Walter had marched the chair outside, scraped the stain off in front of 3 witnesses, and lost money proving himself right. "Some fights are worth the money," he had told Jonah afterward. From the passenger seat, Luis examined the auction flyer. "You know they put contents of Distinguished Craftsman's estate on here," he said. "Grandpa would have hated Distinguished." "Yeah, sounds like he wore a scarf indoors." Jonah kept watching people enter the shop. Dealers in clean boots, neighbors carrying folded umbrellas, men who tapped furniture with their knuckles, and women who opened drawers as if expecting the drawers to lie. "You don't have to go in," Luis said. "I know. We can leave. Get breakfast. You can use the money you're about to waste on eggs. I'm not buying anything." Luis looked over the flyer. "That's what everybody says before an auction. Then some old lady goes home with a sword." Jonah almost smiled. His phone buzzed in the cup holder. The screen showed a message from his landlord. "Need Friday's balance today if possible." Jonah turned the phone face down. Luis noticed. He noticed most things and politely mishandled half of them. "So, breakfast? I just want to see what they're selling. Everything, according to this." That was why Jonah had come, though he disliked admitting it even to himself. The flyer had shown 6 photographs. Walter's drill press, a rack of clamps, 2 oak dressers, a stack of lumber, and partly visible behind a red circle announcing "Preview at 9, the left corner of the workbench." Jonah had stared at that corner until he could see the rest without needing the picture. The flattened glue drips, the burn from the heat gun Walter swore he had not forgotten. The vice handle bent when Jonah leaned his full weight on it at 21. His sister had not called to ask if he wanted it. Of course, Marin had not called about the auction at all. "Okay," Jonah said. "Let's go be distinguished." Luis got out before Jonah could change his mind. Inside, the workshop smelled wrong. The wood and mineral spirits were still there, but now they sat under wet coats, coffee, and the lemon disinfectant Grant used whenever he wanted a place to look managed. The central floor had been cleared into rows. White lot cards hung from twine or rested beneath tools. Walter's belongings had been grouped according to value by someone who believed a thing's purpose could be understood from its shape. Jonah passed a box labeled Assorted Wooden Forms and saw bending jigs Walter had made for a hotel's curved chair backs. A coffee can of brass screws sat in a tray of miscellaneous hardware. Somebody had put the sharpening stones beside landscaping blocks. "Don't," Luis murmured. "Don't what?" "Make that face at every table." "What face?" "The one where you're about to explain why it's wrong. The stones shouldn't be dry." Luis nodded gravely. "There it is." Near the office door, Grant was speaking to Ruth Calder. Grant wore gray slacks and a blue quilted vest that Jonah had never seen him wear while Walter was alive. He had Walter's broad shoulders, but none of his looseness. Walter entered rooms as if he had been invited personally by the furniture. Grant looked as if he had come to check the fire exits. Ruth was short, silver-haired, and dressed in black jeans with a red blazer. She had sold farm equipment, restaurant fixtures, estates, and once an entire bowling alley. Walter respected her because she knew what she did not know. She noticed Jonah first. Her expression did not change much, but she stopped writing. Grant followed her gaze. There were several possible greetings between an uncle and nephew who had not spoken since the nephew was removed from the family workshop. Grant selected, "You came. You advertised. I meant to the service." Jonah glanced toward the office. "Wasn't invited. You don't need an invitation to a funeral," Marin said, "family only." Marin was trying to keep things calm. "Looks like it worked." Ruth placed her clipboard against her hip. "Morning, Jonah." "Morning. I'm sorry about Walter." "Thank you." Grant studied Luis, perhaps wondering whether Jonah had brought him his muscle. Luis was 5'8", round through the middle, and currently eating a powdered donut from the preview table. "This is Luis Ortega," Jonah said. "You've met." "Sure," Grant said, though his face said he had not retained the information. Luis lifted the donut. "Sorry for your loss." Grant gave him a strained nod. At the far end of the room, someone tested the drill press. The motor came alive with a low mechanical hum. Jonah's head snapped around. "That belt needs—" "Everything has been inspected," Grant said. "By who?" "People. Comforting." Ruth stepped between the words before either man could sharpen them. "Machines will be sold as is. Nobody should be switching anything on without staff." She walked away to deal with it. Grant waited until she was gone. "I don't want trouble today. I'm here for the preview. You're here because you can't let anything end." Jonah looked at the lot rows. "Seems like you're doing a pretty thorough job of ending it." For a moment, Grant's face changed. Not to guilt. Something more tired and less useful. "The building closes next month," he said. "The contents have to go. Your grandfather left bills. He left tools. Tools don't pay property taxes. They do if you use them. And there it is. What? That thing you do. Like work as a church and you're the only one who stayed faithful." Jonah felt Luis move closer without appearing to. Grant lowered his voice. "Your grandfather is dead. The shop is being sold. You're not going to turn this into another argument about what he would have wanted. No. You've got professionals doing that." Grant's jaw tightened. Then he surprised Jonah by looking away instead of answering. "Marin is in the back," he said. "If you plan to make a scene, tell her first so she can leave." He walked toward the auction desk. Luis watched him go. "He always this charming?" "No. Sometimes he tries." They moved deeper into the shop. Nearly every object carried 2 lives for Jonah. There was what the bidders saw. And then there was what Walter had done with it. The narrow chisel with the mushroomed handle was not worth $5, but Walter had used it to free a cabinet door in a flood-swollen house while the owner stood behind him praying aloud. The yellow clamp with 1 red pad had held the cracked arm of Grant's favorite chair. The wooden mallet had a pale patch where Marin once cleaned it with bleach, and Walter behaved as if she had shot a horse. None of those stories improved the auction value. People touched everything. A dealer with a waxed mustache opened Walter's tool chest and said, "Mostly users." Jonah turned toward him. Luis took Jonah gently by the elbow. "He means they've been used. I know what he means." "Great. Let's go look at a lamp." "There are no lamps." "Then today is already saving us money." The workbench stood near the loading door. They had cleared the tools from its top, making it look indecently bare. Even the gray wool pad Walter kept beneath finished pieces was gone. 4 casters had been shoved under its legs so buyers could move it, though Walter had always said a proper bench should be harder to shift than a bad opinion. The lot card read 37. Large vintage maple. Workbench with wood vise. Heavy wear. Local pickup only. Jonah rested his fingertips on the edge. The top had been flattened so many times that the middle was thinner than the ends. Along the front ran a line of dog holes, some round, some square, all darkened by hands. Initials crowded the lower rail: WM, G, MM, MJ, Grant's, Marin's, Jonah's. Walter made everyone who worked a full month carve their initials underneath. Jonah crouched, pretending to inspect the vise. His own letters looked shallower than he remembered. "You carved those drunk," Louise said. "I was not drunk. You told me you were. I was trying to make the story better." "Did it work?" "No." "Then I admire your consistency." Jonah ran a thumb over the J. Beneath the bench, a narrow runner was clamped against the back rail, walnut against maple, waiting for a repair that had never resumed. For an instant he saw Walter at the far end, white hair full of sawdust, holding a coffee mug he had forgotten to drink. Jonah had spent the last year trying not to imagine his grandfather's final days. His mind offered them anyway, usually as punishment. Did Walter still sit here after Grant changed the locks? Had he asked where Jonah kept the good scraper? Had he called those 2 times because he wanted Jonah back, or because he wanted his tools labeled before the sale? Jonah stood too quickly. Marin was watching him from the office doorway. She was 34, with Walter's gray eyes and their mother's habit of holding her mouth crooked when she was angry. She wore black trousers and an old green cardigan. The cardigan made Jonah's chest hurt. Walter had bought it for her one Christmas and then spent years claiming it was blue. "Hi," Jonah said. Marin looked at the bench, then at him. "You shouldn't be here. Grant said funerals don't need invitations. This isn't the funeral, no." There was pie at the funeral. She folded her arms. "What do you want?" He could have said the bench. The words sat plainly between them. Instead, he said, "Nothing." Marin glanced at the lot card, then "Don't bid." Before Jonah could answer, Ruth switched on the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, we'll begin in 5 minutes. The room shifted toward her voice. Paper cups went into trash cans. Dealers chose positions. Grant took his place beside the clerk. Luis leaned close. "We can still leave." Jonah looked at his name cut into the lower rail, then at Marin. She knew. That was the part he could not forgive. She knew exactly what the bench was to him, and she had let Grant put a numbered card on it anyway. Ruth began with the drill press. The bidding moved briskly. Tools crossed the room in pieces, $40, $65, $90, while Jonah stood beside the one object he had promised not to buy. When Ruth reached lot 37, Marin had disappeared into the office. "Large maple workbench," Ruth called. "Solid as they come. Who'll give me 50? Jonah kept his hands at his sides. 50 here. 75? A salvage dealer raised 2 fingers. 75? 100? Jonah heard himself say, 100. Luis closed his eyes. Across the room, Grant looked straight at Jonah for the first time all morning. The dealer bid 150. Jonah went to 175. The numbers climbed, each one stripping something practical out of his life. Groceries, gas, Friday's rent. At 290, Luis whispered, "Man, the bench does not love you back. I know. Just checking." Ruth asked for 300. Jonah lifted his hand. The dealer smiled and offered 310. Silence followed. Jonah could feel Grant waiting for him to quit. 310, Jonah said. Ruth looked around the workshop. Last call. Her gavel came down. Sold. Ruth pointed at him with the gavel. Bidder number? Jonah looked down at his empty hands. Luis sighed and raised his card. 142. Thank you, 142. And congratulations on your extremely comfortable new kitchen island. A few people laughed. Jonah did not. Ruth moved on to a rack of clamps before he could understand that the bench was his. Luis held the bidder card against his chest. You owe me $356.50. The buyer's premium is that much? Premium, tax, and whatever fee they charge for watching a man financially injure himself. I have the money. You have some money. There's a difference. Grant passed behind them. He paused beside the bench, his gaze settling on Jonah's hand against the maple top. Of course, he said. Jonah turned. Of course what? You didn't come for nothing. I paid for it. That wasn't my point. I paid more than it's worth, if that helps. Grant gave the bench a flat look. You always did. He walked away before Jonah found an answer that would not prove him right. The auction continued around them, steady and efficient. Walter's drill press went to a cabinet maker from Allentown. A woman in a waxed raincoat bought 3 planes without checking the soles. The brass screws were sold with 2 cans of mismatched hinges for $18. Jonah tried not to watch. Instead, He inspected the casters beneath the bench and planned how they would move it. It weighed at least 400 pounds. Luis's box truck was parked behind his moving office across town, unavailable because one of his employees had taken it to deliver a bedroom set. "We can put it in my pickup," Jonah said. Luis stared at the truck through the open loading door. "Maybe if we take your pickup apart and put it on the bench, we can rent a trailer. With which portion of your remaining fortune? Just help me get it outside." "I am helping. I'm helping you consider gravity." The clerk called Luis to settle the invoice. Jonah stayed with the bench, partly to keep anyone from setting coffee on it, and partly because he had nowhere else to stand. At the front of the room, Ruth sold Walter's tool chest for $190. Jonah could not see the buyer. He told himself he did not care. When Luis returned, he carried a paid receipt and 2 paper cups. "I made them put your name on it," he said. "Since identity appears to be what we're purchasing today." Jonah took the coffee. "Thank you. You're welcome. I also added $5 to your debt. This coffee didn't cost $5. Emotional service fee." They borrowed a furniture dolly from Ruth's crew and worked the bench onto it. The old casters protested, one turning sideways beneath the left rear leg. Luis pushed while Jonah steered, though steering suggested a degree of control neither of them possessed. They made it halfway to the loading door before the dolly wheel caught a crack in the concrete. The bench lurched. Jonah threw his shoulder under the vise end. Something knocked against the lower rail. "Easy," he said. "I'm being easy," Luis said through his teeth. "The building is crooked." They lowered it. Jonah crouched to straighten the wheel and saw the narrow strip of walnut clamped beneath the back edge. It was about 20 inches long, plain smooth on one side, with a shallow groove cut down the other. Walter had penciled a small P near one end. Jonah looked past the bench. The sideboard stood in the next furniture row, dark walnut with oval brass pulls and one missing drawer. A yellow sticker on its top read, "Lot 64. He left Luis holding the bench. "Where are you going?" Jonah opened the sideboard's upper drawer. It dipped toward the missing runner. Inside, faint beneath the auction tag, was a strip of blue painter's tape. "Park, right runner." "Jonah," Grant said from behind him. Jonah peeled back the auction sticker, exposing more of the tape. "Where did this come from?" "It was in the shop. It belongs to Eileen Park. You don't know that." "I was here when she brought it in. That was more than a year ago. It didn't become Grandpa's because he took too long." Grant stepped closer. "Leave the labels alone." Jonah scanned the row. The 6 ladder-back chairs beside the sideboard had masking tape under their seats. The cedar trunk behind them carried Walter's diagonal chalk mark near the left hinge. Ruth noticed the interruption and handed the microphone to her clerk. She came over with the deliberate calm of someone accustomed to arguments over dead people's lawn equipment. "What's going on?" "This sideboard was a repair job," Jonah said. Grant exhaled. "He thinks it might have been. There's a customer's name inside." Ruth bent to inspect the tape. She did not touch it at first. "Was this represented to us as customer property?" she asked. "No," Grant said. "We inventoried the building. Who did?" "Me, Marin, 2 people from your office. My people identify and photograph what the consignor says belongs to the estate. They don't establish title. I'm not accusing your people." "Good." Grant glanced toward the bidders. Several were watching openly. Others had become intensely interested in nearby furniture while angling their bodies to hear. "This can be sorted out after the auction," he said. "Pull this one lot." Jonah moved to the chairs. Under the first seat, the tape read, "D. Bell, 4 of 6. These 2. "You don't know when those were left here," Grant said. "It doesn't matter when. It matters if nobody came back for them. Did you call?" "Call who? A piece of tape?" Ruth crouched beneath another chair. The name matched. An older man near the front raised his hand without waiting for the microphone. "Those are mine." Everyone turned. He wore a tan rain jacket and held a folded umbrella. Jonah knew his face without knowing his name. "Dennis Bell," the man said. "Walter was red-gluing them. I paid half." Grant's color rose. "Mr. Bell, we can speak privately." "I've been calling. Numbers disconnected. Walter died. I know Walter died." The bluntness silenced even the people pretending not to listen. Ruth stood. "Are there other items here that came in for repair?" "I don't know," Grant said. Jonah did. "Not each one, not yet." But the shop had a posture he recognized. Finished pieces waiting near the front. Incoming jobs against the east wall. long-term work in the rear racks. Grant had moved everything into auction rows and erased those distinctions. Jonah crossed to the cedar trunk. This mark means the customer paid a deposit. It could mean anything, Grant said. It means deposit. Because Walter told you? Because I made the chalk system. Maren appeared in the office doorway. Her gaze traveled from the exposed tape to the people clustered around Ruth. What happened? Your brother happened, Grant said. Ruth held up one hand. I need an answer from the estate representatives. Can either of you verify that every item in these rows belonged to Walter? Maren did not look at Jonah. No. Grant turned on her. Maren, we went by what was in the building. You told me you had the customer list. I had the invoices I could find. A woman in the second row spoke. Is there a maple drop leaf table? Maren looked toward her. There are several tables. Mine had a water stain shaped like Tennessee. Someone chuckled, then stopped when no one else did. The woman pushed through the row and found a table near the wall. She ran one palm over its folded leaf. This is it. A green lot card hung from the stretcher. Ruth took the microphone from her clerk and switched it on. The small burst of feedback made everyone wince. Ladies and gentlemen, we're pausing the auction. How long? The salvage dealer called. Until I know we are selling property the estate has the right to sell. Grant leaned close to Ruth, speaking under the microphone. You can't shut down an entire sale because of 3 pieces. I can shut it down because I don't know if it's 3. We have a closing deadline. I have a license and a reputation. It was the nearest Ruth came to raising her voice. Grant looked at Jonah, and the accusation in his face was so personal that Jonah almost apologized. That angered him more. You knew customers had pieces here, Jonah said. I knew your grandfather repaired furniture. I did not know he was warehousing half the county's dining room. He wasn't warehousing it. What would you call unfinished work sitting here for 14 months? Jonah had no answer that would help Walter. Ruth announced that registered bidders could receive refunds on unpaid purchases or arrange pickup of completed lots. Several people complained. Most, however, did what people did when presented with somebody else's family disaster. They stayed nearby in case it became interesting again. Luis moved beside Jonah. The bench is paid, he said quietly. I know. I'm mentioning it because that woman has the expression of a person who refunds first and asks questions later. Ruth overheard. The bench was sold before the issue arose. Mr. Mercer can take it. Grant laughed once without humor. Perfect. Jonah faced him. What does that mean? It means you get your relic. The auction falls apart. And I get to explain why we can't deliver the building empty. You listed property that wasn't yours. I listed what was left after you walked away. The words struck cleanly. Maren closed her eyes. Jonah stepped toward Grant. You locked me out. You were told to leave. By a sick man after you spent an hour telling him I'd worked him into the hospital. You did work him into the hospital. And you're still using him to say it. Luis said Jonah's name, low and warning. Grant's hands stayed at his sides, but his shoulders had gone rigid. He could barely stand some mornings. You kept taking jobs. He kept taking jobs. You could have said no. So could you. You only came here to tell him to quit. I came here to keep him alive. And how'd that go? The silence afterward felt like a dropped tool. Grant's face emptied. Jonah wanted the sentence back before it had finished leaving him, but there was nowhere to put it. Maren walked past them and began removing lot cards from the disputed furniture. Ruth assigned 2 employees to block off the rows. Then she gathered Grant, Maren, and Jonah in the office. Luis followed without being invited and leaned against Walter's old filing cabinet. The office was almost bare, pale rectangles marked where photographs had hung. Walter's desk had already been sold, leaving 4 clean dents in the linoleum. Ruth set her clipboard on the sill. I'm not rescheduling until the property is separated, she said. That means names, contact attempts, and written confirmation for anything claimed. Grant rubbed both hands over his face. The building has to be cleared in 21 days. Then you have 21 days. Maren looked at the workshop through the office window. I can go through the invoices again. The invoices won't be enough, Jonah said. Grant gave him a cold look. Nobody asked you? Ruth did. Can you identify the work? Some of it. How much? Jonah looked through the glass at the rows Walter had left unfinished. He recognized a chair with a temporary spline, a cabinet door wrapped to prevent warping, the curved form sold as scrap. Farther back, something under a moving blanket had feet he remembered carving. Not enough to fix the mess, enough to become responsible for it, more than anybody else, he said. Grant stared at him for a long moment. Fine. 21 days. Take your bench, sort the customer pieces, and get them out of my building. Our building, Marin said. Grant did not look at her, not for long. Outside the office, Dennis Bell waited beside his 6 chairs with his receipt folded in one hand. Jonah stepped toward him. Mr. Bell touched the loose back of the nearest chair. Walter said these would be done by Thanksgiving. Jonah tested the joint. It moved under his thumb. Thanksgiving had been 8 months ago. I know, Jonah said. No, you don't. The man's voice was not cruel. That made it worse. Jonah looked back at the workbench. The walnut runner was still clamped beneath it, waiting for someone to finish what Walter had started. I can find out, he said. Mr. Bell studied him, then bent and looked beneath the chair seat. Your name's down here, too. Jonah crouched beside him. In the corner, below Walter's larger pencil notation, was J. M. The handwriting looked younger because it was. I replaced 2 stretchers, Jonah said. Before I left. You remember? I remember the wood fought me. It was my mother's set. Jonah waited, afraid the next sentence would introduce another death. She's alive, Mr. Bell said. Mean as weather and living in Scranton. Keeps asking why I gave away her chairs. That's encouraging. You haven't met her. Mr. Bell straightened. I don't want the chairs back like this. They need regluing. One rear post has a split. Grandpa probably stopped because the old glue has to be cleaned out by hand. Can you do it? Behind Jonah, Grant made a sound that could have been a warning or simple indigestion. Jonah pressed the loose joint once more. The chair flexed in a familiar way. It was not difficult work. It was only 6 chairs, several days, glue, clamps, a new post if the split proved worse than it looked, and the possibility of disappointing a living woman in Scranton. Yes, he said. Grant came forward. That isn't what we agreed. We agreed to sort the customer property. Returning it sorts it. Mr. Bell looked between them. I paid Walter $400. Grant's expression tightened. We'll confirm that against the records. I have the receipt. Then we'll reimburse you. With what? Marin asked. Grant turned. Not now. No, this seems like exactly when. She had gathered a fistful of removed auction cards. There's $12,000 in the estate account. The roof payment is due, and Ruth's going to charge us for today's setup, whether she reschedules or not. Ruth, standing near enough to hear, said, half the setup fee. Marin looked at her. I am not a charity, Ruth said. I'm also not charging you for selling furniture that isn't yours. Mr. Bell tucked his receipt back into his jacket. I don't want money. I want 6 chairs I can sit in. All 6 at once? Louise asked. Mr. Bell gave him a cautious glance. Sorry, Louise said. Long day. Jonah put the chair down. Give me a week. Grant stared at him. You don't have a shop. Jonah pointed to the room around them. You don't have this shop. Then give me a week in it. The closing company needs access. They can access it. I don't restore furniture naked. Louise lifted one finger. That sounds like a policy worth putting on the sign. Mr. Bell's mouth twitched. Grant did not smile. 7 days. These chairs and the other customer pieces get identified and removed. You don't accept new work. You don't use the business name, and you don't make me responsible for whatever promises you decide to hand out. 21 days, Ruth said. That's the auction deadline. That is the deadline you just gave him to sort the property. I didn't give him permission to reopen. Jonah felt the old argument taking shape beneath the new one. Grant saw the workshop as a body that should have been declared dead. Jonah saw every unfinished joint as proof that it was still breathing. Marin pushed the office door open. We don't even know how much belongs to customers. Then that's first, Grant said. Nobody repairs anything until we know what we're dealing with. Mr. Bell folded his umbrella under one arm. Should I come back? Jonah looked at the chair, then at Grant. Tomorrow afternoon, Marin said. We'll have a property release for you. And my week? She met Jonah's eyes. Starts tomorrow. It was not permission. It was more than she had offered him in a year. Mr. Bell left without shaking anyone's hand. Ruth's crew moved the completed purchases toward the loading door, while Jonah and Marin began separating questionable lots. Grant found a roll of red tape and marked a rectangle on the floor. Anything with a name, chalk mark, repair tag, or unexplained missing part goes inside this area, he said. You're making a crime scene, Jonah said. I'm making a boundary. Louis pressed the tape to the concrete with his boot. Honestly, boundaries are underrated in this building. They started with the furniture row nearest the wall. Jonah turned chairs upside down and opened drawers. Marin photographed every identifying mark and recorded it on a yellow legal pad. Grant checked the invoices she brought from the office. The records were incomplete without being mysterious. Walter had always hated paperwork. He wrote customer phone numbers on the backs of envelopes, copied estimates into carbon books, and occasionally marked a completed payment with a coffee ring because the paid stamp had gone missing. This says, Helen, leg 75, Marin said. Jonah examined the small cherry table in front of him. Not this one. This is Maple. Maybe Helen has a leg. Then she should see a doctor. Marin's pen paused. For half a breath, Jonah thought she might laugh. Her mouth bent. Then she wrote, Maple. No match in block letters. He moved to a carved oak chair. Walter's tape beneath the seat had darkened with age. Mrs. Santoro, he said. Marin scanned the invoices. Nothing. She paid cash. How do you know? She always paid cash. That's not proof. No, it's Mrs. Santoro, Jonah. She brought pitzels in a blue tin and paid exact change. Grandpa complained because she counted it twice. Marin wrote the name down. Do you know if she's still alive? No. Do you know her first name? He did not. She set the pen on the pad. This is what Grant's talking about. Grant didn't know it belonged to anybody. And you know half of a story and act like it's a complete address. The words came out sharper than the situation required. Jonah turned the chair upright. What do you want me to say? I want you to stop looking at me like I did this to him. I didn't say that. You haven't said anything to me in a year. You told me not to come to the funeral meal. I told you it was family only because Grant said you were going to fight him. I was family before Grant took a vote. You told him Grandpa's death was his fault 10 minutes ago. Jonah glanced toward Grant. He was across the room with Ruth, discussing fees. If he had heard, he gave no sign. I shouldn't have said that. No, you shouldn't have. Marin picked up her pen. Her fingers shook once, then steadied. Jonah lowered his voice. Was he asking for me? She looked at the page. After I left, he said. Did Grandpa ask? Marin drew a line beneath Mrs. Santoro's name. We're sorting furniture. That's not an answer. It's the answer you get today. She walked to the next piece. Jonah stayed with the oak chair until Louise nudged him with the end of the tape roll. Help me move this, Louise said. This was a maple drop leaf table with a dark stain on one side. The woman who claimed it waited nearby, arms folded, while Ruth prepared a release form. Up close, the mark did look vaguely like Tennessee, if Tennessee had suffered a fungal infection. What happened? Jonah asked. Plant, the woman said. My husband watered it for 9 years without using a saucer, I kept telling him. Is he coming to pick it up with you? He died in March. Jonah's hand stopped on the leaf. She saw the reaction and frowned. People die. The table still needs fixing. Yes, ma'am. He used to put his coffee on that stain every morning. Walter wanted to bleach the whole top. I told him not to. Did he? He said he understood. Jonah lifted the leaf. Walter had feathered new color around the stain, lightening its edge without removing it. The work was unfinished but careful. He did, Jonah said. The woman leaned closer. Her fingers passed over the dark shape. Huh. You can take it as it is, or I can finish the protective coat. How long? Grant called from across the room. No promises. The woman looked toward him. Is that man in charge? He thinks so, Jonah said. I heard that, Grant said. I can finish the coat in 2 days, Jonah told her. It won't change the stain. She considered the table. Friday, then. Friday. Grant's red tape rectangle expanded. By early afternoon, 18 pieces sat inside it. 6 chairs, the sideboard, the cedar trunk, 3 small tables, an upholstered settee with one arm removed, a roll-top desk, 2 cabinet doors without their cabinet, and a walnut bed frame tied together with cotton rope. The curved wooden forms had already been sold as scrap. Jonah found them on the loading dock beside the waxed mustache dealer's van. Those are part of a customer job, Jonah said. The dealer glanced at the forms. Receipt says assorted wood. They shape replacement arms for a set in the back. You want to buy them? They were sold by mistake. Not my mistake. Ruth came onto the dock carrying her clipboard. Mr. D'Angelo, I'm voiding that lot. I drove an hour. And I'm refunding you. I came for those. You called them firewood 15 minutes ago. Vintage firewood. Ruth took his receipt. My clerk will process it. The dealer looked at Jonah. This place always run like this? No, Jonah said. Usually the coffee's worse. By 3, the bidders had gone. Ruth's crew stacked unsold lot cards on the auction desk. Rain blew through the loading doorway in a fine mist. The workbench still sat where Jonah and Luis had abandoned it. We need a trailer, Luis said. Or 6 stronger friends who don't ask why. Jonah walked around the bench. Without the crowd, it seemed to have settled back into the shop. Put it where it was. Luis looked at Grant. Grant was taking down directional signs. Absolutely not. We need it to finish Belle's chairs, Jonah said. You bought it. Remove it. With what? Not my problem. Marin came out of the office holding the legal pad. The casters will damage the threshold if they force it through the front. The auction crew already left. Grant stared at her. She shrugged. You like the threshold? I replaced it. You mention that a lot. Luis gripped one end of the bench. I'm hearing 3 votes for inside. No one voted, Grant said. They rolled the bench back across the floor. The right front caster caught twice. Jonah guided it toward the pale rectangle where it had stood for more than 40 years. When the legs settled, the workshop looked less empty and more wounded. Grant watched from the loading door. 1 week, he said. Then it goes. Jonah put his palm on the scarred top. Fine. And you sleep wherever you've been sleeping. I have a room. Good. Jonah's phone buzzed. The landlord's message still waited beneath a second one. Friday means today. Luis read the screen over his shoulder. That room feeling secure? Very. Marin set the list on the bench. 18 pieces, she said. 8 customers we can identify. 3 numbers disconnected. One person says Walter already returned her table, so we have no idea whose table is here. Jonah looked across the red tape at the furniture, then down at Walter's walnut runner, still held in the vise. Call Eileen Park first, he said. Why? Because that sideboard needs to be gone before Grant changes his mind. From the doorway, Grant said, I heard that too. Jonah loosened the vise. The screw resisted, then turned with the same dry complaint it had made all his adult life. Under the clamped runner, Walter had penciled one more word. Short. Jonah measured the piece against the sideboard. Walter had stopped because he had cut it 3/8 of an inch too short. It was a mistake Walter would once have thrown across the room before anyone could see it. Jonah held the useless piece in both hands. For the first time that day, the shop felt less like a shrine and more like a place where his grandfather had been tired. It offended him more than it should have. Walter had cut hundreds of drawer runners. He could read a ruler through scratched safety glasses in bad light, with Jonah talking beside him. 3/8 short was not an ordinary miss. 3/8 was a man measuring once because he was too tired to measure twice. Jonah found a pencil and wrote the correct length on the useless runner. What are you doing? Marin asked, making a note. On the piece that doesn't fit? Yes, why not throw it away? He set it on the bench instead. Because I bought the trash too. Marin opened the sideboard's remaining drawer and found another strip of blue tape with Eileen Park's number. She called from her cell while Jonah measured the damaged opening. Eileen answered on the 4th ring. Parks, she said. Hi, this is Marin Mercer, Walter Mercer's granddaughter. Silence came through the speaker. Jonah busied himself checking the groove. Marin's voice softened. Yes. Thank you. I'm calling about your sideboard. A longer silence. No, it wasn't sold. Jonah looked at her. Because the auction was stopped. Grant, within hearing distance, picked up a folding chair and carried it unnecessarily across the room. Marin listened, then held the phone out. She wants to talk to you. Why? You could ask her. Jonah took the phone. Hi, Eileen. Are you back? He looked at the bench, at the red tape boundary, at Grant pretending not to listen. Temporarily. That isn't what I asked. I'm in the shop. Walter said you weren't coming back. The sentence went through him slowly. When? Bring my sideboard to the restaurant, Eileen said. We'll talk there. It isn't finished, then finish it. Grant shook his head. Jonah turned away from him. The runner has to be remade. I know what a runner is. I know you know. Do you? Because you're explaining it. He heard kitchen noise behind her, metal striking metal, and somebody calling for more onions. Monday, Jonah said. Tomorrow. Tomorrow's Friday. I own a calendar too. The glue needs overnight. Then Monday. She hung up. Luis held out his hand for the phone. I like her. You haven't met her. I like decisive strangers. Familiar people are exhausting. Grant set the folding chair down where he had picked it up. No work leaves without a signed release. Fine, Jonah said. And a photograph. Fine. And the customer acknowledges that the estate isn't responsible for the quality of your repair. Jonah turned. You want Eileen to sign a warning label about me? I want there to be no confusion. There hasn't been confusion. You sold her furniture, almost sold it. Maren put herself between them by holding up the legal pad. I'll write a release that says the property was received. Nothing about quality. Grant opened his mouth. You told me I was handling the paperwork, she said. He shut it again. Jonah carried the sideboard nearer the bench. Its case was solid, but the right drawer opening had twisted slightly after months without support. Walter had removed the damaged runner, cleaned out the old nails, and stopped. On the top, near the back corner, a pale circular mark interrupted the dark finish. Jonah rubbed it with his thumb. It looked like an old water ring that had already been worked on. He checked the underside of the top for Walter's notes and found only EP, runner, top. Runner and top, Jonah said. Maren glanced over. What about the top? Probably the ring. Ask her. I will. He did not call back. Grant locked the front door at 5. Ruth's red blazer had disappeared an hour earlier, along with her crew and the temporary auction signs. Without strangers inside it, the shop became too quiet. Jonah found Walter's broom near the utility sink. Grant had sold the industrial vacuum, but overlooked the broom because its handle was wrapped with silver tape. Jonah swept dust, donut sugar, and curled auction stickers into a pile. Luis loaded the drop-leaf table into his pickup so Jonah could work on it overnight at his rented room. You have enough ventilation? Luis asked. For water-based finish. Your landlord know you're refinishing furniture upstairs? My landlord thinks I'm a quiet professional. You repair motel air conditioners. Quietly. Luis leaned against the tailgate. You want me to float you the rent? No. I didn't ask if you wanted to marry me. I've got it. You bought a bench. I've got most of it. Most rent is a donation. Jonah tied the table down. I'll pick up extra calls this weekend. The motel maintenance company paid him per job. July was kind to broken air conditioners and cruel to the men who repaired them. He could spend Saturday changing capacitors on roof units if enough guests complained. Luis watched him pull the strap tight. You have to stop making every problem an endurance contest. I'm not. You haven't eaten since the donut. You ate the donut. Exactly. I'm thriving. Jonah agreed to dinner only because Luis refused to release the ratchet strap until he did. They ate meatball sandwiches on the loading dock while rain darkened the parking lot. Luis discussed a moving customer who had packed 27 boxes of hardcover books and labeled each one light. Jonah listened with half his mind. The shop windows reflected the bench behind him. Walter's first message had come 8 months after the lockout. Jonah had been beneath a sink in a roadside motel, replacing a corroded shutoff valve. His phone vibrated against the tile. He saw Grandpa and let it ring because he had wet hands. That was the reason he gave himself then. The second call came 4 days later. He had watched that one until the screen went black. He never heard Walter's voice after the argument. Hey, Luis said. Jonah looked up. You've been holding that sandwich like it owes you money. Jonah took a bite. The bread had gone soggy. Luis drank from his soda. Maren will tell you. Tell me what? Whatever you asked her in there, she might not know. She knows. That was worse. Jonah finished the sandwich without tasting it. At his room, the drop-leaf table occupied most of the floor between his mattress and a sink with 2 mismatched cabinet doors. His landlord had rented the old apartment above the tire shop as studio living, which meant the bed could see the stove. Jonah cleaned the table with mineral spirits, lightly scuffed Walter's unfinished coat, and checked the stain shaped like Tennessee. He worked around it carefully. At midnight, the compressor behind the tire shop kicked on and made the window glass tremble. He brushed on the protective coat under a box fan, watching the finish level itself. The dark mark remained. It looked less like Tennessee once the surface was wet, more like a hand with 2 fingers missing. His phone buzzed with an after-hours maintenance call at the West Haven Motor Lodge. Room 214 had an air conditioner leaking onto the carpet. He covered the table with a clean sheet, grabbed his tool roll, and left. By morning, he had repaired the air conditioner, unclogged a bathtub in room 109, and been accused by a man in a bathrobe of controlling the cable channels. The motel manager paid him $90 in cash and 2 packets of blueberry muffins from the breakfast counter. Jonah gave $70 to his landlord, promised the remaining balance by Monday, and drove to the shop with 1 muffin in his mouth. Maren was already there. She had opened the front windows and placed 3 bank boxes on the workbench. Grant stood beside her with a ring of keys. "I thought my week started today," Jonah said. "It does," Grant replied. "At 8. Jonah checked the wall clock. "It's 7:53. "You look terrible." "Thank you." Maren slid a coffee toward him. "Cream, no sugar, correct." He stopped before taking it. "What are the boxes?" "Every estimate, receipt, envelope, and piece of paper from Walter's office that might identify customer work." Grant unlocked the supply cabinet. Inside were glue bottles, finish cans, sandpaper, and replacement hardware. "Use what's here," he said. "Don't order anything against the estate. I wasn't going to. Don't throw away scraps without checking." Jonah glanced at the short walnut runner on the bench. Grant noticed. "Why is that there?" Grandpa cut it short. Grant picked it up and measured it with his eyes, an old habit Walter had taught both of them. "How short?" 3/8. Grant's thumb moved over Walter's penciled word. He set the piece down carefully. "The close date isn't flexible," he said. "I have contractors coming Monday to inspect the back wall. Keep the walkway open." "That it?" "No." Grant looked around the shop. "Don't pretend this is yours." Jonah drank the coffee. It was hot enough to hurt. "I paid for the bench. I mean the rest." Maren's gaze moved between them. "He knows." Grant left. For several minutes, the only sound was traffic on the wet street and the clock above the office ticking 2 minutes slow. Jonah opened the first bank box. "Did Grandpa ask about me?" Maren pulled a file toward herself. "Good morning to you, too. I'm not waiting another day. You waited a year. I didn't know there was an auction until Louise saw the flyer. That isn't what I mean." Jonah closed the box. Maren took off her glasses and rubbed the bridge of her nose. "Yes." The word was quiet. He sat on Walter's old stool. "How often?" "Not every day, not in some dramatic way. He'd ask if I'd heard from you. Or whether your truck still made that grinding noise. Once he wanted to know if you'd taken his 6mm wrench. I did not. I told him that. He kept it in the wrong drawer. I don't care about the wrench." Jonah looked down at his coffee. "Did he say why he called?" "No." "Did you tell him I didn't answer?" "I didn't know he called you. You had his phone. I wasn't monitoring him. He was sick. He was not a prisoner." Jonah looked toward the bench. Grant made him sound like one. Maren put her glasses back on. Grant was scared. He was always scared. He just preferred making it everybody else's emergency. "And you were never scared?" Jonah did not answer. Maren opened the file. Eileen Park paid $600 toward the sideboard. Walter estimated $850. For a runner and a top repair. He wrote, "Water damage, preserve ring." Jonah looked toward the pale circle. "Preserve it? That's what it says." He took the paper from her. Walter's handwriting had grown uneven, but the instruction was legible. "Keep Rose's ring." Rose was her wife, Maren said. I know who Rose was. Rose had sat at the restaurant's rear table every morning, with black coffee and the crossword. She had died 2 years earlier. Jonah examined the mark more closely. Walter had begun blending the finish around it, not removing it. The ring was not damage Eileen wanted repaired. It was the part she wanted protected. He set the file beside the sideboard and started on the runner. The correct stock was in Walter's walnut bin. Jonah cut it long, planed it down, and fitted it 6 times before applying glue. His hands remembered the work faster than the rest of him did. Maren made calls from the office. One number belonged to a dental supply company now. Another reached a man who insisted he had never owned a settee and became offended by the suggestion. By noon, the sideboard drawer traveled smoothly. Jonah turned to the top. He should have stopped after cleaning it. He knew that later. At the time, he saw an uneven patch Walter had left near Rose's ring. The new finish would show every ridge. Jonah selected fine sandpaper and worked carefully around the pale circle. The old lacquer softened faster than he expected. A dark edge broke beneath his hand. He lifted the paper. Half of Rose's coffee ring had disappeared. For several seconds, Jonah's mind tried to turn the damage into something else. A trick of the light. Dust. A spot that would darken when wet. He rubbed mineral spirits across the surface with one finger. The wood deepened, and the truth became clearer. The pale ring had been a thin interruption in the old finish. Where he had sanded, the interruption was gone. Marin came out of the office carrying a note. Mrs. Santoro is Teresa Santoro, and she is very much alive. She says the chair is. She stopped. What happened? Nothing good. She set down the note and looked over his shoulder. Is that the ring? Half of it. How do you sand half a ring? Efficiently. Jonah? I thought Grandpa was leveling the finish around it. The file said, preserve. I know what the file said. You read it 5 minutes ago. I know. He dropped the sandpaper onto the bench. A crescent of pale lacquer remained, absurd and accusing. Marin touched the untouched edge, careful not to make anything worse. Can you put it back? I can color it. That isn't what I asked? No. He could tint shellac, feather in the lighter edge, build a convincing ghost of the mark. From 3 feet away, Eileen might never know. That thought shamed him more than the mistake. Marin picked up her phone. I'll call her, Jonah said. You should. I said I will. Then stop saying it to me. He washed the dust from his hands before dialing, though Eileen could not see them. The restaurant answered with the clatter of lunch service. Parks, it's Jonah. You finished early. I damaged the top. The kitchen noise seemed to recede. How? I sanded through part of Rose's ring. Eileen did not speak. I thought I was smoothing the repair, he said. I read the note. I knew it had to stay. I heard you. I can rebuild the color, but it won't be the same finish. Don't touch it. I won't. I'm coming over. She hung up. Marin leaned against the bench. That went well. Thank you. You want me to stay? No. She nodded and stayed. Jonah moved to the bell chairs, because standing over the sideboard felt like waiting beside an injured person. He labeled each loose part and began softening the old hide glue with warm water. His hands were too impatient. After nearly splitting the first rung, he put down the mallet. Grant entered through the loading door carrying a folder and a bag of fast food napkins. He saw both of them waiting in silence. What now? Nothing, Jonah said. Marin said. He damaged Eileen's sideboard. Grant placed the folder on the nearest table. Of course he did. Jonah turned. I removed part of a mark she wanted saved. You've had access to the shop for 4 hours, I told her. That doesn't undamage it. I'm aware. Grant examined the top without touching it. Was the mark noted on the estimate? Yes, Marin said. Then the estate refunds her. No, Jonah said. I do. With what? Jonah's silence answered. Grant looked at him with something worse than satisfaction. Weariness. This is why I wanted the pieces returned. She didn't want it returned unfinished. She wanted Walter to finish it. So did I. Grant's expression tightened, but before he could answer, the front door opened. Eileen Park came in, wearing black kitchen pants, running shoes, and a short-sleeve button-up printed with red peppers. She was 62, compact and straight-backed, with cropped white hair and forearms strong from decades of lifting stock pots. Jonah had never seen her move quickly. She crossed the shop without wasting a step. Everyone made room. Eileen stopped at the sideboard. The remaining half of Rose's ring caught the window light. Oh, she said. Jonah had prepared himself for anger. That one syllable was harder. I'm sorry. Eileen leaned close. You used a machine? No. Fine paper? You did that by hand? Yes. Good. I'd hate to think you'd become lazy. Grant cleared his throat. Mrs. Park, the estate will reimburse your deposit and pay for restoration by someone of your choice. Eileen looked at him. Who are you? Grant Mercer, Walter's son. I know who you are. I'm asking why you're talking. Louise would have liked her even more. Grant held himself still. Because this occurred in the estate's building. It occurred on my furniture. Yes. So, I'll speak to the person who did it. She faced Jonah again. He said, The runner is repaired. I didn't come about the runner. I know. Tell me what you saw. A water ring. What did I see? He looked at the pale crescent. Rose's coffee. No. You're reaching for poetry because you made a stupid mistake. Marin lowered her eyes. Grant did not. Eileen placed 2 fingers beside the ring. I saw the morning we opened Parks. We didn't have enough tables, so this sideboard was in the dining room. Rose sat on an upside-down milk crate doing the produce order. She put her coffee here. I told her she'd ruin the finish. A smile touched Eileen's mouth and disappeared. She said, "Then we'll have one less thing to be scared of ruining." 28 years later, she was still putting coffee on it. I should have asked. Yes. I thought repair meant, I know what you thought. Make the bad part look like the parts nobody touched. Jonah nodded. Walter did that too, Eileen said. First time he worked on it, he tried to talk me into refinishing the whole top. Rose told him if he made it beautiful, she'd hit him with a skillet. Grant looked at the ring. Dad didn't mention that. You weren't here. The words landed without force and still made Grant step back. Eileen opened the repaired drawer. It slid cleanly, stopped, and closed with a soft wooden sound. That's good, she said. It is. You always were arrogant. I said it's good because it is. I didn't say you were wrong. She looked at the top again. How close can you make it? I can tint shellac to bring back the missing curve. I can feather it into the old finish. Up close, you'll see the difference. Will it look like the ring? Yes. Will you pretend it is the ring? No. Good. Do that. Jonah hesitated. You trust me? No. But now you're paying attention. She took a pen from Marin and wrote her name on the release form. Grant said, There will be no charge. I owe $250. You paid Walter $600. And the estimate was $850. The estate isn't completing the repair. Eileen pushed the signed form toward him. Then the estate can argue with Jonah about who gets the money after I pay for work I asked for. Jonah said, I'm not charging you. Yes, you are. I damaged it. And you're fixing it. That isn't the same. It's how work goes. You make mistakes. Then you stay and make them as right as they can be. She picked up the short walnut runner from the bench. What's this? Grandpa's first attempt. Eileen saw the penciled word. He was making mistakes too. Apparently, he made more near the end. Jonah's throat tightened. You saw him? Twice a week. He ate lunch at Parks until Grant took his car keys. Grant's face hardened. He backed into a delivery van. The van survived. He could have killed someone. He could barely reach 12 miles an hour. That isn't the point. Eileen set down the runner. No. The point is you were all trying to keep Walter from dying, and none of you asked him what he wanted to do while he was still alive. Grant looked away. Jonah gripped the bench edge. He told you I wasn't coming back. Eileen's attention returned to him. He said you were stubborn. He called twice. I know. Did he say why? He wanted to apologize. The room seemed to narrow around Jonah. For what? For telling you to leave. Did he want me back in the shop? Eileen studied him. You're still doing it? Doing what? Turning the man into the work. Jonah let go of the bench. He wanted you back in his life, she said. I don't know what he wanted done with the shop. I don't think he knew. Why didn't he call again? He thought 2 calls were an effort. That sounds like him. I told him to try 3. Why didn't you tell me? Eileen's face softened, which Jonah did not want. You stopped coming to the restaurant. You changed numbers. I didn't change numbers. Then Walter wrote it down wrong. 3/8 short. 1 wrong phone number. Tiny failures with enough room inside them to lose a year. Eileen tapped the sideboard. Monday, I'll have it, and eat something. You look like a man who's been repaired by the lowest bidder. After she left, Grant gathered his folder and napkins. I didn't know Dad went to her restaurant that often, he said. No one answered. He looked at Jonah. If you ruin the top, it comes out of your pocket. It already does. Grant left through the front door. Marin sat on a box of invoices. He had a spare key to Dad's car. What? Grant. When Grandpa backed into the van, Grant didn't just take the keys. Grandpa gave them to him. Eileen made it sound. Eileen wasn't there. Jonah began gathering pigments and shellac. Marin watched him. You're going to hear a lot of stories. People tell them from where they were standing. That includes you. Yes. He looked at her. Are you ever going to tell me yours, when you can hear it without deciding which one of us is guilty? She returned to the files. Jonah spent the afternoon rebuilding a coffee ring. He mixed amber and pale gray, tested each tint on scrap walnut, and laid the curve down in layers thin enough to see through. The first attempt looked painted. He wiped it away. The second was too round. Rose's cup had made an imperfect oval, heavier at one edge. Marin stood beside him. "Can you tell?" he asked. "Yes." "From there?" "Yes." He frowned. She said not to pretend. He looked again. The old half and the new half did not match perfectly. Between them ran a slight shift in color, a seam anyone could miss if they were not searching for it. Jonah put down the brush. "All right," he said. Marin touched the untouched half with one finger. "All right," she agreed. Marin capped the pigment bottles while Jonah cleaned the brush. "You're not putting finish over that tonight." "I know. You said that like you were going to do it anyway." "I know it needs to set. You also know sleep needs to happen, and you keep treating that as an opinion." Jonah checked the wall clock. The woman with the drop-leaf table had been expecting him nearly an hour ago. "I have a delivery. You have a truck with a table sitting outside in damp air. It's covered." That's what people say immediately before showing you water damage. They closed the windows and carried the sideboard to the center of the shop, away from drifting dust. Marin switched off the lights, leaving only the lamp above the bench. "You have a key?" Jonah asked. She held up her ring. "I'll come back after the delivery." "No." "The Bell chairs will continue being chairs until morning. I told him a week, and tomorrow will still be inside the week." Jonah looked at the bench. Marin saw him calculate how difficult the rear window would be to open from outside. She pulled a spare key from her ring and placed it on the maple top. "Grant will be furious. Then don't tell him. He inventories keys like other people count money. Why give it to me? Because if I don't, you'll climb through something and bleed on the customer furniture." She picked up her purse. "Lock the door. Don't sleep here. I have a room." "So?" "You keep saying." The woman with the stained table lived in a narrow stone house on a street where every driveway appeared designed before trucks existed. Jonah carried the table through the front door with Luis, who had arrived primarily to recover his straps. The woman met them in the dining room. "My name is Joan Weller," she said. "You looked embarrassed when you realized you didn't know it." "I was." "Good." Walter knew it. She opened one leaf, then the other. The fresh protective coat shone softly without making the old finish look plastic. Tennessee remained dark near the edge. Joan ran her hand over it. "You didn't lighten it." "No." Walter did a little. He feathered the color around it. "I finished the coat." She stood with one palm resting where her husband's coffee cup had sat. "Looks like a table," she said. Jonah waited. "That's praise. Don't get greedy." She gave him a receipt showing a $200 deposit. "I only applied finish," Jonah said. "The estimate was $350. The estate can refund? I've had that conversation." Joan opened her wallet. "Your sister said payment wasn't due until I approved the work." She handed him $150. He did not take it. "You need to get better at this part," she said. "At what?" "Letting a transaction end." Luis accepted the money for him. "We're working on it." Outside, he handed the bills to Jonah. "That's your rent. It belongs to the estate." The estate didn't do the work, it bought the finish. Then reimburse at $12. Marin is tracking payments. Congratulations. Your family has discovered bookkeeping after death. Jonah slid the bills into his wallet. At the tire shop, his landlord was closing the garage. Jonah paid the remaining rent plus $10 toward next week. The landlord counted the money beneath a fluorescent work light. "You repair antiques now?" he asked. "Apparently. Better than motels?" "No." "Then you're doing it wrong." Upstairs, the room smelled faintly of finish. Jonah showered, set an alarm, and lay down fully dressed. The alarm went off 6 hours later. He returned to the workshop carrying coffee and found Grant already inside, holding the spare key. Grant placed it on the bench. "Marin told me. I didn't sleep here. That wasn't my concern. It seemed like your concern. My concern is access to a building under contract. Contractors come through Monday. Doors stay locked. The door was locked. By someone who isn't insured to work here. I'm family when you need customer pieces sorted, and a trespasser when you don't." Grant inspected the sideboard. His gaze paused on the rebuilt ring. "You made it visible. That was the point. Does Eileen approve? She will Monday. You said that confidently for a man who thought a water ring was damage." Jonah drank his coffee. "Did you come here early to help, or just improve morale?" Grant removed his vest and hung it on a peg. "I came to check the rear wall before the contractor does. That's not what I asked. It's what I answered." He walked to the back of the shop. Jonah loosened the joints on the first bell chair, separating each rung without splitting the wood. Walter had marked mating pieces with tiny pencil slashes, 2 lines to 2, 3 to 3. On the fourth chair, the rear post opened along the grain farther than Jonah expected. He stopped. The split ran through the upper mortise. Glue alone would not hold. He could reinforce it with a spline, but Mr. Bell's mother had owned the set, and the chair had already survived enough shortcuts. Jonah checked the oak rack. The available stock was flat sawn, too wild in grain to match the straight, narrow figure of the old post. Grant returned with white dust on one shoulder. What? I need quarter sawn oak. There's oak. Not the right cut. Grant examined the post. Spline it. It'll show. It's under the back rail. It'll still show. So Walter estimated a new post. You know that? He wrote NP beneath the seat. That could mean no problem. Grandpa never wrote no problem about a chair. Grant took the damaged post and turned it beneath the window light. You'll have to shape the crest by hand. I know. The grain won't match after stain. I know. Then don't act like the right board makes it simple. Jonah took the post back. I didn't. Grant went to inspect the rear wall again, but not before Jonah saw his hand move unconsciously along the split, reading it. The lumberyard wanted $92 for a board wide enough to yield matching posts. Jonah stood beside the rack while an employee waited. You want it cut down? The employee asked. No. Delivery? No. The board was 9 feet long. Jonah owned a pickup with a 6-foot bed and no working tailgate latch. He paid anyway. Back at the shop, he found an elderly black man sitting on the workbench stool with a turned walnut spindle across his knees. His work shirt was buttoned to the throat despite the heat. Darnell Brooks was stitched above the pocket. Grant stood near the office, looking 10 years younger and twice as irritated. Jonah, he said, this is Darnell. I know who Darnell is. Darnell had worked beside Walter at the Henshaw chair factory before it closed. He had attended every Mercer funeral Jonah could remember and fallen asleep during 2 of them. Darnell looked Jonah up and down. You got skinny. Good to see you too. You still measure from the wrong end? There's no wrong end. That's why Walter worried. Darnell held out the spindle. This is from the settee. The upholstered settee inside the red boundary had 1 arm removed and 3 empty holes along its lower rail. Where was it? Jonah asked. My shop. Why? Walter asked me to copy it. My lathe motor burned out. I told him I'd bring it back. Then he died, and your uncle tried to sell the rest of the thing. Grant said, nobody knew you had it. Nobody called me. We didn't know to call. Walter's address book got my name in it. The address book has 6 people named Darnell. 5 of them are me. He kept writing me down whenever I moved. Jonah carried the spindle to the settee. The remaining spindles were walnut too, but each had a slightly different color. Did he choose stock? Jonah asked. Darnell pointed toward the scrap rack. Back there. Board with white chalk. Jonah found it behind several pieces of mahogany. A pale streak ran along one edge. This won't match, Grant said. It will after it oxidizes. The heartwood's too purple. Darnell looked at him. You became a wood expert selling medical equipment? Dental equipment. And I worked here too. For 6 months. 2 years. Felt like 6 months. Jonah turned the board beside the window. A dark curl in the grain echoed the spindle. It's the right one, he said. Grant looked from Jonah to Darnell, outnumbered by men who knew exactly why. Darnell nodded. Walter said you'd see it. When? February. Jonah nearly dropped the board. He had been locked out the previous April. Grandpa said that? He said if I couldn't match it, wait till Jonah stopped being a jackass. Grant made a brief choking sound. Darnell looked at him. He said you were one too. Don't get comfortable. Jonah ran his thumb along the pale edge. Did he think I was coming back? Walter thought everybody was coming back. Man kept broken hinges 20 years. That isn't an answer. It's the one I got. Darnell stood and took his cap from the bench. You need a lathe? I don't have one. Walter's was sold this morning. Jonah looked at Grant. Grant crossed his arms. It was not part of the disputed property. Who bought it? Machinist outside Bethlehem. Darnell shrugged. Mine works now. Jonah studied him. You want to turn the replacement? No. Then why offer the lathe? So you can turn it. I haven't used one in a year. Then it'll be exciting. Darnell gave him his shop address and left the spindle. Marin arrived with sandwiches and another list of disconnected numbers. She found Grant at the bench examining the short drawer runner Walter had miscut. "Rear wall, okay?" she asked. "Moisture near the foundation. Contractor will say whether it needs sealing before closing." Jonah set the quarter-sawn oak on sawhorses. Marin looked at the price written on the end. $92 for one board, for the right board. Grant smiled without amusement. "Now you know why Dad stopped making money." Jonah laid the broken chair post on the oak and traced its shape. He stopped making money because he charged like it was 1998. He stopped making money because every repair became a moral test. Some things deserve to be done right. Everything deserves to be done right. That doesn't mean someone can afford to do it. Jonah set down the pencil. "Mr. Bell paid $400 for 6 chairs. Your lumber is $92. Add glue, finish, shop hours, and the 3 days you're about to spend matching one post. I said I'd finish them." "Yes. You said it before you looked." The criticism was fair. Jonah hated Grant most when he was fair. Marin placed the sandwiches on the bench. "Dennis Bell is coming, Wednesday. Teresa Santoro is coming this afternoon. Eileen's sideboard leaves Monday. We found the owner of the cedar trunk." "How much work is left on it?" Jonah asked. "She doesn't want it finished. She wants it back." Jonah nodded. "That can happen," Marin said. "Someone can just want their property." "I know. You look disappointed. I'm not." Grant tapped the outline Jonah had drawn on the new oak. "You left no extra at the crest," Jonah checked. He had traced too close to the board's edge. Once shaped, the curved top would be short, the same mistake Walter had made on Eileen's runner. Grant handed him the pencil. "Start again," he said. Then he picked up half a sandwich and went to answer the loading door. Teresa Santoro came through the loading door, carrying a blue metal tin. Grant stepped aside. She was small, silver-haired, and dressed for a nicer occasion than the recovery of one damaged chair. She wore pearl earrings and a cream raincoat despite the clear sky. "Which one of you is Jonah?" she asked. Jonah wiped his hands on his jeans. "I am." She looked him over. "You got older, so did you." Grant closed his eyes. Teresa smiled. "Walter said you were quick. He didn't always mean it kindly. He usually did." She placed the blue tin on the workbench. The lid was painted with white snowflakes. Marin saw it and looked at Jonah. "Pizzelles," he said. "Anise," Teresa corrected. "Not vanilla." Walter complained every time, then ate 6. 8 if nobody was watching. I was always watching. She found her oak chair inside the red boundary. Its finish had dulled, and the front left joint moved when she pressed the arm. "I brought it in last September," she said. "Walter told me 2 weeks." Grant shifted his weight. Teresa noticed. "I know he was sick. He also hated admitting when he couldn't do something." Jonah turned the chair over. Walter had drilled out one loose dowel, but not replaced it. "The repair would take an hour, plus drying time. I can finish this today. I didn't ask you to. You wanted it repaired. I wanted Walter to repair it." Jonah set the chair upright. Teresa touched the worn arm. "This sat beside my husband's desk. He died 11 years ago, and I've managed to survive without turning every object he touched into a religious artifact. Mrs. Santoro. Tess." "Grandpa called you Mrs. Santoro. He enjoyed annoying me." She pressed the loose joint again. "If you fix it, will it hold?" "Yes." "Will you scrape away the dents?" "No." "Will you turn it glossy?" "No." "Then fix the joint." Jonah waited. "That was me asking," she said. He carried the chair to the bench. Teresa opened the tin and offered pizzelles to everyone except Grant. Grant stared at her. "You said my chair had no known owner," she told him. "I didn't know your first name. You didn't know my last name either until Marin found it. I apologize." "Good." She offered him a cookie. Jonah loosened the damaged joint, while Teresa sat on a stool and told Marin which phone number in Walter's files was current. Her voice carried through the shop, crisp and practical. She had already paid Walter in full. She did not want a refund. She wanted the chair sound enough to lean on while reaching into the bottom drawer of her husband's desk. "Not a religious artifact," Jonah said. "I didn't say I was throwing the desk out." He replaced the dowel, cleaned the mortise, and re-glued the joint. The bench held the chair square while he tightened 2 clamps. Walter had bored a row of dog holes at exactly the right distance for the setup. Jonah did not have to think about where anything went. Teresa watched him work. Your grandfather used to whistle, she said. He thought he whistled. What did he do when you were here? Talked. That must have slowed production. Considerably. She nodded as if this confirmed something. When the chair was clamped, Jonah wrote her name on a strip of fresh tape and added the pickup time. He stuck it beneath the seat where Walter's old tape had been. Marin opened the tin again. Do you mind leaving these? I brought them for that. You said you brought them for Walter. No, dear. I said Walter ate them. Teresa left with Grant's promise that nobody would auction the chair before the glue dried. Grant watched her cross the parking lot. She never liked me. You almost sold her furniture, Jonah said. Before that. You have a gift. Grant took a pizzle from the tin. Jonah spent the rest of the afternoon laying out the bell chair post correctly. He left extra wood at the crest, rough-cut the shape, then used Walter's spoke shave to bring it close. The old tool had missed the auction because it was hanging beneath the bench behind a canvas apron. Marin recorded it as estate property. You could pretend you didn't see that one, Jonah said. I could pretend we don't owe half the county furniture. That too. You know Ruth will sell the remaining tools once we clear the claims. I know. His hands slowed anyway. At Darnell's shop, a converted two-car garage behind a narrow ranch house, the air smelled of walnut shavings and machine oil. 3 clocks on the wall showed 3 different times. Darnell claimed they were all correct somewhere. His lathe was older than Jonah and louder than Luis. Darnell handed him a face shield. You remember the tool rest goes close? Yes. You remember which direction the wood spins? Yes. You remember to move your head if it explodes? Helpful. I've been thinking of printing a manual. Jonah mounted the walnut blank and brought it round. The first touch of the gouge rattled his elbows. Darnell said nothing, which was more unnerving than criticism. The old spindle lay on the bench for reference. Jonah copied its beads and coves with calipers, working slowly. The pale streak in the chosen board disappeared as the diameter narrowed, leaving heartwood whose purple cast would darken toward the original. After 20 minutes, his breathing matched the machine. Darnell leaned against a cabinet. Walter stopped by here after Grant took his car keys. How? Bus. Grandpa hated the bus, complained the whole time. Driver let him off 2 blocks away, and Walter accused the city of moving my house. What did he want? To use the lathe? For the spindle? For something? He changed his mind when he saw me. Why? Darnell shrugged. Pride likes privacy. Jonah shut off the machine. The new spindle slowed beneath his hand. Was he bad? He was old. That isn't what I asked. It's what everybody keeps forgetting. Darnell measured Jonah's spindle at the center. You're heavy by a 16th. Jonah remounted it. By the time he finished, the new spindle matched the original, closely enough to look related rather than copied. Darnell rubbed a little alcohol over the wood. The grain lifted into view. Walter was right, he said. About the stock, about you seeing it. Jonah removed the spindle. He taught me. He taught Grant too. Grant doesn't care about this. Darnell looked toward the open garage door. Grant cared enough to hate being bad at it. He wasn't bad. Walter made him feel bad. Jonah turned. Darnell selected a broom from the wall. Your grandfather was a decent man. That's not the same as being decent every minute. What did he do to Grant? Ask Grant. He won't tell me. Then he's a mercer. Darnell swept shavings toward Jonah's boots until Jonah moved. The sideboard's final coat cured through Sunday. Jonah took motel calls between sanding chair parts, slept 4 hours in his rented room, and returned before sunrise because he had dreamed of Rose's ring spreading beneath the finish. It remained intact. On Monday, Luis helped load the sideboard into his truck. Marin brought the release form and insisted on coming to Parks. Why? Jonah asked. Because somebody has to collect the estate balance you plan to refuse. I don't plan refusals. That's true. You improvise them. Eileen had cleared a space beside the restaurant's rear wall. The lunch crowd had not arrived, but the room smelled of onions, coffee, and bread warming in the kitchen. The sideboard fit between 2 windows as if the wall had been waiting for it. Eileen opened each drawer. She checked the runner by pulling it out farther than necessary, then ran her palm across the top. Her hand stopped on the ring. The old half was paler. The rebuilt half held a warmer amber at one edge. Jonah could see the seam from where he stood. Eileen bent until her eyes were level with the surface. Marin held the release form without moving. Finally, Eileen set a white coffee cup over the mark. It covered most of the old half and none of the new. Rose's cup was wider, she said. Jonah's chest loosened enough for breath. I can change it. No, it isn't quite no. Eileen lifted the cup. You want it perfect so you can stop feeling bad. That isn't the same as me wanting it changed. Jonah looked at the ring. All right, you say that better now. She signed Marin's form and counted $250 from the restaurant register. Marin took it. Eileen then put 3 20s in Jonah's hand. What's this? For the new runner. The runner was part of Walter's estimate. The estate can pay Walter. I'm paying the man who made one that fit, Marin said. That is not how the accounting works. It is at Parks. We need to record it, then write down that I tipped him. You don't tip a furniture repairman. Eileen looked at Jonah. Do you see what your family does when offered money? Yes. I see why the shop failed. Marin accepted the joke with more grace than Grant would have. Before they left, Eileen wrapped 2 meatloaf sandwiches in butcher paper. For the workers, she said. Marin isn't working on furniture, Jonah said. Eileen handed both sandwiches to Marin. Back at the shop, Grant stood with a contractor beside the rear wall. A moisture meter was pressed against the brick. The contractor finished, packed his tool, and left. How bad? Marin asked. Manageable, Grant said. If we keep everything 8 inches off that wall. Jonah looked toward the disputed furniture. That's half the storage space. It's what we have. Marin set her files on the workbench. Ruth needs the confirmed estate lots by Thursday if she's going to advertise the new date. That gives us 10 days after that to clear customer work, Grant said. Some jobs won't be done in 10 days. They don't have to be done. They have to be gone. Jonah unwrapped a sandwich. Dennis Bell expects 6 repaired chairs. Wednesday. That was your promise. The settee needs 3 spindles and finish. Return it unfinished. The owner paid $700. Grant rubbed his forehead. Do you understand that every completed repair creates a new obligation? Every unfinished one already is an obligation. To whom? To the people who trusted Grandpa. Grant looked at the 18 pieces inside the red boundary. And when the materials cost more than the balances, when they don't pay, when you run out of time, Jonah had answers for the work, none for the money. Marin opened her legal pad. 11 owners confirmed, she said. 5 want the work finished, 3 want immediate return, 2 are deciding. 1 died, and I'm still trying to reach the person handling the house. Grant said, return all 11. No, Jonah said. The word came without heat. That made Grant listen. Jonah placed Walter's walnut spindle and the new one side by side on the bench. The grain was not identical, but it belonged. I'll finish the 5. You don't know what that costs. I'll find out. You don't know if they want you. I'll ask. You don't know if the balances cover the work. Then I'll know that too. Grant glanced at Marin, perhaps waiting for her to stop him. She turned to a clean page. Which 5? She asked. Jonah moved the first piece beside the bench, then the second. The shop had been emptied into rows by people who saw objects. Walter had worked in a sequence, incoming pieces near the east wall, dirty repairs by the sink, joinery at the bench, finish near the windows, completed work by the front. Jonah began putting the room back in that order. By the time the meatloaf sandwich was cold, the red boundary was gone. In its place was a working path through unfinished promises. Grant stood outside it, holding the roll of tape. You have 10 days, he said. Jonah adjusted the new chair post against Walter's worn dog holes. Then, stop talking to me. Grant threw the tape onto the bench. Now you sound like him, he said. The sentence hit harder than Grant intended. Jonah could tell because his uncle looked as if he wanted to retrieve it. Instead, Grant picked up the roll of tape and walked toward the office. Jonah fitted the new chair post again. The crest stood slightly proud of the old back rail. He marked the excess with a knife. Marin unwrapped the second meatloaf sandwich. You want half? No. You already gave away breakfast. I ate a pizza. That was yesterday. He kept carving. She set half the sandwich on a clean piece of paper beside him. Walter used to do that too. Jonah looked up. Do what? Make everybody use the dead person as a weapon. I didn't bring him up. You didn't have to. You arranged the whole room around him. It's a workflow. I know. She took her half into the office. By Tuesday afternoon, the shop had acquired a rhythm. Marin worked the phones and records. Jonah moved between repairs according to glue times, finish times, and the patience of whatever wood was in front of him. Teresa's chair left first. She paid nothing, accepted no apology for the delay, and took her blue tin home empty. The bell chairs occupied most of the bench. Jonah cleaned every joint, replaced 2 hidden dowels, reinforced the split post, and shaped its replacement until the old rails seated without force. The new oak remained paler, even after stain. He mixed color by the window and waited for it to dry. The settee waited near Darnell's walnut spindle, the cedar trunk left unfinished with its owner, who hugged it before remembering she was angry. A small cherry table turned out not to belong to Helen or to anyone else they could identify. Ruth moved it into the confirmed estate row. Every answer made the room a little clearer. It also made Jonah poorer. The bell repair needed more glue and finishing supplies. The settee's upholstery had to be opened to secure the new spindles, and the old tacks could not be reused. Walter's finish cans were either skinned over or labeled in a shorthand Jonah no longer understood. Brown 2 is not a color, Marin said, holding up a can. It was to him. There are 3 cans marked Brown 2, different years. Of what? Brown. She put the can down. This business deserved to fail. Jonah sniffed the finish and recoiled. This one did. He listed the supplies he needed. The total came to $284 before upholstery work. Marin checked customer balances. We can take $190 from the estate once they approve. Grant won't. It isn't Grant's decision. He thinks everything is Grant's decision. He's the executor. And you own half the building, not half the bills. Jonah folded the supply list. He drove to his rented room and came back with a random orbit sander, a cordless brad nailer, and the small compressor he used on maintenance jobs. Luis met him behind a pawn shop. You use that compressor? Luis said. I can borrow yours. You already owe me for the bench. Add air. Luis took the compressor from the truck bed and put it back. I'll buy the sander and nailer. You don't need them. Neither does the pawn shop. You hate sanding. I'm going to discover a passion. Luis gave him $200 and refused the charger, which made the transaction so obviously temporary that Jonah could not protest without sounding grateful. He spent $168 at the finishing supplies store. The rest went into his gas tank and the shop's coffee can, after Marin labeled it customer work expenses. That evening, a maintenance call took him to a motel where an ice machine had flooded the vending alcove. He vacuumed water until 1 in the morning, drove back to the shop to apply the final coat to the bell chairs, and sat down on the floor to wait for the fumes to clear. He woke with his cheek against his folded jacket and a table leg 6 inches from his face. Marin stood over him. You said you weren't sleeping here? I wasn't. Then I was. You're lucky Grant isn't here. He has a house. So do you. Room. She nudged his boot. Get up. The wall clock said 6:20. Jonah had slept less than 3 hours. He checked the chairs before standing. Don't touch them, Marin said. I'm looking. You can look vertical. She had brought coffee and 2 egg sandwiches. He ate one while checking the finish. The new rear post looked good in the weak morning light. Not invisible, but respectful. Marin sat on the edge of the workbench with her sandwich untouched. Grandpa didn't ask for you the night he collapsed, she said. Jonah stopped chewing. He couldn't talk much. Grant called the ambulance. I met them at the hospital. I know. No, you know the version where Grant found him and used it to take over. You don't know what happened after. Jonah set down the sandwich. Marin stared at the floor. He was admitted for 6 days. I stayed the first night. Grant stayed the second. Grandpa pulled out his IV twice because he wanted to come here and finish a cabinet door. Sounds right. It wasn't funny. I didn't say it was. You smiled. The smile disappeared. Marin wrapped both hands around her coffee. He was scared. He couldn't button his shirt. He couldn't get from the bed to the bathroom without help, and all he talked about was the shop. I wanted him to say he was afraid. I wanted him to say thank you. I wanted him to ask how I was doing. Jonah sat beside the bell chairs. He asked if you'd taken the 6mm wrench, she said. That was later. It was the first morning. I didn't take it. I know you didn't take the wrench. Her voice cracked on the word, and she became angry at it. He kept talking about what you knew, which customer wanted satin, where you stored the walnut dowels. Like, if I could answer enough shop questions, he wouldn't need you. Jonah looked at the bench. You hated me. I hated both of you. You for leaving me with him, and him for making your absence the loudest thing in every room. He told me to leave, and you did it perfectly." Jonah had no defense that did not sound like one. Marin rubbed her thumb over a coffee drop on the cup lid. "When Grant said family only, I agreed because I thought you'd come in angry and make the funeral about the shop. I would have come in angry, yes. I wouldn't have made it about the shop." She looked at the chairs, the files, the stains on his shirt. He let out a breath. "Maybe I would have." Marin nodded. "I'm sorry you handled it alone," he said. "I wasn't alone. Grant was there. That isn't what you said before. I'm trying to say it now." The front door rattled. Dennis Bell arrived 20 minutes early, carrying no umbrella because the sky was clear. He walked around the 6 chairs while Jonah removed the last protective pads. His hand paused on the new rear post. "This is different. It had to be replaced. I thought Walter was repairing the old one. The split ran through the mortise. It wouldn't hold safely." Mr. Bell compared the grain. "My mother will see it." "Yes. You couldn't make it darker." "I can. I don't think I should. It'll darken naturally. If I force it now, it could look black in 5 years." Mr. Bell frowned at the chair. Jonah's exhaustion sharpened every second of silence. "The work is solid," Jonah said. "If you don't approve, I'll keep it and adjust the color. I need them tonight." "You can take 5. Leave this one. I need 6. "For what?" Mr. Bell glanced toward Marin, then away. "My mother is moving into my house. We're having dinner at her table before we take it apart. The steak was adult, ordinary, and somehow more difficult because nobody had died." Jonah touched the finish. It was dry, but not fully cured. "Use it carefully, don't drag it, no tablecloth against the back until tomorrow." Mr. Bell looked at him. "A tablecloth goes on the table, then we're safe." He almost smiled. They loaded the chairs into Mr. Bell's van. Jonah wrapped the new posts separately. Mr. Bell signed the release and handed Marin an envelope containing the remaining balance. Before leaving, he rested one hand on the replaced post. "My mother won't like it." Jonah waited. "She doesn't like my house either, still moving in." He closed the van. Afterward, Marin counted the cash. $300. That's too much. The estimate balance was $250. He added $50. For what? He wrote "Rush" on the envelope. Jonah watched the van turn onto the street. Marin put the extra $50 into his hand. "That belongs to you." He did not argue this time. Ruth arrived before noon to inspect the revised auction inventory. She wore brown boots, black jeans, and no red blazer. "You look worse," she told Jonah. "I'm hearing that a lot. It's because you look worse." She checked each remaining lot against Grant's list. The estate row had shrunk by almost a third. Several attractive pieces were gone, either returned or awaiting repair. "This will reduce the sale total," Ruth said. Grant stood beside her. "I'm aware. Attendance may be lower after the postponement. I'm aware. I'm not criticizing. You have an auctioneer's way of not criticizing." Ruth glanced toward Jonah. "Inherited?" "Unfortunately," Grant said. She approved the new list and scheduled the auction for the following Saturday. That left 9 days before the building had to be empty. While Grant and Ruth discussed advertising, Jonah began fitting Darnell's new spindle into the settee. One mortise had widened and needed a walnut insert before it could hold. He clamped the frame across the bench. The vice screw groaned. Jonah stopped turning. A thin crack ran from one of the mounting bolts into the worn maple corner. It had not been there at the auction. He loosened the pressure and examined the underside. The old steel hardware had pulled slightly away from the top. Marin came over. "Can you fix it?" "Yes." "How long?" He looked at the settee, the remaining customer work, and Ruth marking sale lots beyond it. "Not now." He repositioned the frame using bench dogs and lighter clamps. Grant appeared beside him. "You're going to make that worse. I know how to use a vise." "That's not what I said." Jonah kept adjusting the settee. Grant crouched beneath the bench and traced the crack to the steel plate. This was always the weak corner. Grandpa reinforced it. I reinforced it. Jonah looked down. Grant stood. "After the flood," he said. "Before you were here." The vise shifted again under the settee's weight. Grant put one hand on the steel mounting bracket. "Take the frame off," he said. "I can support it. Take it off before you tear the corner out." Jonah heard command and criticism. Beneath both was knowledge. He removed the settee. Grant examined the old plate in silence, then looked toward the rack where Walter's welding clamps used to hang. "They sold," Jonah said. I know. You watch them go. I know. Grant straightened and wiped dust from his hand. Don't use the vice, he said. Then he left Jonah standing beside a workbench that was finally his and already coming apart. Jonah moved the settee to 2 sawhorses and spent 40 minutes arranging clamps that accomplished less than the vice had done in 10 seconds. The frame twisted each time he tightened one corner. The new spindle seated on the left and lifted on the right. He loosened everything, added a caul, and started again. Ruth paused on her way out. That furniture or modern sculpture? Depends who pays. Who does pay? Currently me. That's a poor business model. I've been getting a lot of business advice from people liquidating the business. Ruth considered that, then nodded toward the bench. Walter ever repair auction pieces for me? Probably. He charged me. He liked you. Exactly. She left before Jonah could ask what that meant. Marin finished updating the customer list and taped a schedule above the bench. She had divided the remaining 9 days into blocks for joinery, curing, pickup, and final removal. The settee owner, Celia Vaughn, had paid Walter $700 toward a $900 estimate. $200 remained. Jonah's materials for the settee alone came to $136. This column is getting worse, Marin said. It's just numbers. That is the traditional behavior of numbers. The next jobs are simpler. You said that before the chairs. He tightened the makeshift clamp and watched the settee frame rise again. Marin pointed at it. That looks simple. Go call somebody. I called everyone. Call them again. She did not move. You can't finish 5 jobs, work motel calls, repair the bench, and move everything out in 9 days. I'm not repairing the bench yet. That improves 1 item in the sentence. I'll manage. You say manage when you mean endure. Luis said the same thing. Luis is smarter than he looks. That's his whole strategy. Marin took the schedule down and added a block marked sleep. Jonah crossed it out. She put it back. The settee took the rest of the day. Without the vise, Jonah built temporary braces across its open frame and used the bench's dog holes to hold the base square. The workbench was less convenient, but still useful. Every hole Walter had bored offered another option. When Celia came to inspect the progress, she wore a violet pantsuit and carried photographs of the settee from before its arm loosened. My parents bought it used, she said. Then my sister had it for years. I took it after she moved to Arizona. Jonah compared the old photograph with the exposed frame. This lower rail was replaced once. Walter did that. The repair's good. He said it wasn't. That sounds like him. He said you would have chosen a better piece of walnut. Jonah looked at her. Celia adjusted one cuff. He talked about you a lot. I assumed you lived in California. Why California? That's where people's disappointing relatives go. Marin made a sound from the office that might have been laughter. Celia touched Darnell's new spindle. This one's lighter. It'll darken. That's what you told Dennis Bell. You talked to Dennis. He showed me his chairs. Jonah waited for judgment. He said his mother called the new post an insult to oak. That sounds bad. She sat in it all night. Celia studied the open upholstery. I don't need this perfect. I need the arm solid, and I need the fabric back where it belongs. I can do that. When? Tuesday. Marin appeared in the office doorway. Wednesday. Jonah looked at her. Tuesday is finish cure, she said. Celia nodded. Wednesday. After she left, Jonah pointed at the schedule. You work for me now? I work for calendars. He finished fitting the spindle and glued the settee frame. The makeshift arrangement held until midnight. At 12:15, his motel dispatcher called about a room door that would not latch. Jonah looked at the settee, then at the supply expense can. He took the call. The door required a new strike plate, 2 shims, and 40 minutes of listening to the motel guest describe every burglary he had ever read about. Jonah earned $60. On the drive back, his dispatcher offered him 3 more weekend jobs. He accepted all of them. By Sunday, his life had divided into short stretches measured by drying glue and motel checkout times. He slept in his truck outside the shop twice. The first time, Marin left coffee on the hood. The second, Grant knocked on the window at 6 in the morning. Jonah woke with his hand on the horn. Grant stepped back as the blast echoed down the empty street. Jonah rolled down the window. What? You're parked across the loading door. Go around. I have a truck coming for the estate lumber. Jonah sat up. His neck had stopped functioning somewhere near his left shoulder. You sold the lumber? It's in Ruth's approved inventory. I'm using some of it. Which pieces? Jonah could not remember. Grant opened the passenger door, removed 3 fast food bags and an empty coffee tray, then found the supply list beneath them. You've spent $348. Marin made you a column too. She asked the estate to reimburse $190. It's fine. Your rent current? Jonah looked at him. I saw the message at the auction, Grant said. You read my phone? You held it where letters exist. My rent is none of your business. Neither were Eileen's furniture or Belle's chairs until you made them everybody's. Jonah got out, his back seized halfway upright. Grant waited. I paid the rent, Jonah said. I'm taking maintenance calls and sleeping in the truck between them. I'm not sleeping in the shop. That wasn't the goal. You said, I said it because the building's under contract and the insurer doesn't know you're working overnight. There it is. What? The reason you can say out loud? Grant's mouth tightened. Move your truck. The lumber buyer arrived in a flatbed and took most of Walter's maple and oak stock. Jonah set aside the confirmed customer pieces before loading began. Grant did not object, though Ruth's lot list included several of them. When the flatbed left, the racks looked skeletal. Jonah found a narrow strip of ash he needed for the roll-top desk and carried it to the bench. Grant was beneath the vise with a flashlight. I told you, I'm not using it. You're using the bench. Weight transfers, it's held 40 years. The plate held. The wood around it didn't. Grant stood and tapped the top near the crack. The sound changed at the corner. You need to pull the hardware, relieve the damaged wood, and add a wider plate. That'll erase half the front edge. It'll remove rot and split fibers. It isn't rot. It's oil-soaked maple that has been compressed since Carter was president. I can bridge it with hardwood. Across the grain, with bolts. You'll create another split. You welded one strap and think you invented the bench. Grant's eyes sharpened. I rebuilt the entire base after the flood. I know. You've mentioned it? No, I haven't. Jonah set down the ash strip. Grant ran a hand along the lower rail, over GM. The water came through the rear wall and sat 16 inches deep. Dad was ready to throw this out. Top had lifted off the base. Legs were swollen, stretchers were loose. I spent 6 weekends drying it, planing the joints, making steel shoes for the feet. When? 1994. Jonah had been 3. Grandpa told me he saved it after the flood. He was here. That's not the same as doing it. I know. The word came flat. Jonah looked again at Grant's initials beneath the front rail. He had always assumed Grant carved them during a teenage summer before deciding he preferred office clothes. The letters were deeper than Jonah's, cut by an adult hand. Why'd you stop working here? Grant switched off the flashlight. I got a job. Darnell said, Grandpa made you feel bad at it. Darnell enjoys surviving long enough to become vague. Were you bad? Grant placed the flashlight in his pocket. No. It was the first proud thing Jonah had ever heard him say about the shop. Then why? I said I got a job. You sell dental equipment. I run regional accounts. You don't have to defend it. Then don't say it like an apology. Grant walked toward the office. Jonah called after him. How wide does the plate need to be? Grant stopped but did not turn. 8 inches past the crack. 12-gauge steel, rounded corners, or the edge becomes a knife. Can you make it? A pause. No. Grant went into the office and closed the door. Jonah stared at the vise. He knew a fabrication shop that could make the plate, but not before Thursday and not cheaply. The bench needed to survive only until the customer work was done. After that, he could repair it properly. He went back to the roll-top desk. Its tambour door had jammed because 3 slats had separated from the backing cloth. Walter had removed the entire door and laid it flat, leaving Jonah to replace the cloth and feed the repaired tambour through a curved channel. The operation required steady pressure across its width. Jonah arranged long calls, but the near end kept lifting. He added a clamp at the damaged corner of the bench, keeping it well away from the vise. The crack made a faint sound. He froze. Nothing moved. Jonah loosened the clamp and shifted it toward the center. The tambour slipped out of alignment. Fresh glue smeared along one slat. Come on. He cleaned it, reset every piece, and tried again. The bench held. Monday brought 3 motel calls, a message from his landlord about next week, and a voicemail from Celia asking whether Wednesday still meant Wednesday. Jonah returned to the shop after dark, carrying upholstery tacks and a bag of sandwiches. Maren had left the schedule on the bench. She had added 2 words beneath sleep, not optional. Jonah ate half a sandwich standing up. Then he finished the settee arm, applied the first color coat to the spindles, and turned to the roll top. The glue had cured crooked. One slat stood higher than the others. The door would never pass through its channel. He softened the glue, separated the cloth, and started over. This time, he used the vise only to hold the long caul while he aligned the tambour. No direct pressure on the cracked corner, no heavy frame, one careful half turn. The screw tightened. The steel plate beneath the bench gave a sharp metallic pop. The entire vise tore forward. Jonah caught it against his thigh as the maple corner split open, dropping old bolts, splinters, and 60 pounds of iron into his arms. He staggered backward and lowered the vise to the floor. For a moment, the shop was silent. Then the cracked corner of Walter's bench sagged, its front edge hanging by a strip of darkened wood. Jonah stood over it, breathing hard. On the floor beside his boot lay Grant's old steel strap, bent but unbroken. Jonah touched the broken edge. The wood crumbled beneath his fingertips. Decades of oil, pressure, and old water had darkened the maple nearly black around the bolt holes. The split ran farther than Grant had predicted, following the front edge toward the first dog hole. He lifted the loose section and held it in place. It no longer fit. The vise had torn out fibers as it fell, leaving a ragged gap. Repairing it properly meant cutting back to sound wood, fitting new maple, and mounting the hardware through a wider plate. It meant replacing part of the bench Walter's hands had touched every day. Jonah found a square and drew a line across the damaged corner. He moved the line farther back, then farther. By the time he picked up a handsaw, he had marked away nearly 9 inches of the front edge. The office door opened. Grant stood there in shirt sleeves, his tie loosened. He looked at the vise on the floor, then at the line. Put down the saw. Jonah set it on the bench. "What are you doing here? Maren said you weren't answering." "My phone died. She said your phone was at 40%. Jonah looked toward the charger on the windowsill. Grant came closer. "How many turns?" "1. "How many after it tightened?" "Half." "You used it." "Yes, I told you not to." "I heard you." Grant crouched beneath the broken corner. He pressed a screwdriver into the dark fibers and watched them separate. "What are you planning?" "Cut back to solid wood, scarf and new maple. You marked through the dog hole. It's in the damaged section. It isn't damaged. The crack runs under it. Then you bridge the crack. You don't amputate everything around it." Jonah's temper rose because Grant sounded like him. "I need the bench working by morning. You need the bench working for another 40 years. I don't know where it'll be in 4 days. That doesn't change the repair. It changes how much time I have." Grant picked up the bent steel strap. "This didn't fail. The bolts did. The wood failed around the bolts. I know." "Then stop drawing lines like you're angry at it." Jonah took the square off the bench. Grant examined the front edge from several angles. "We can save the dog hole, cut a shallow pocket beneath the crack, fit maple across the grain, then carry the load into a wider plate. You said cross grain would split. I said bolts through a hardwood bridge would split. This needs room to move. With what tools? You sold the drill press, the welder, the clamps." Grant looked toward him. "You bought the bench. I'm aware of the transaction. You could have stopped at 300. The salvage dealer wanted the top. He wanted firewood. He didn't know what it was. Neither did you, apparently." Jonah stepped back from the bench. "Go home." Grant turned the old strap over in his hands. "No." The word was quiet. Grant called Darnell, who answered by saying, "Somebody better be leaking blood." "No blood," Grant said. "Then morning exists. I need your welder." Darnell was silent for a moment. "You remember how?" "Yes." "That wasn't an insult. I forget things." "Open the garage. You got coffee?" "We'll bring coffee." "Then I remember how to open the garage." They loaded the old plate, vise hardware, and broken section into Grant's SUV. Jonah had never ridden in it. The passenger floor was clean except for a dental equipment catalog and a packet of cinnamon gum. "You still hate cinnamon," Jonah said. "It keeps me awake. You could buy mint. I don't need help choosing gum." They drove without speaking. Darnell opened his garage wearing dark trousers, slippers, and a work jacket over a white undershirt. He accepted the coffee, looked at the bent strap, and said, "Walter? Finally win?" Grant set the hardware on the welding table. Wood gave out. Wood took its time. Darnell found a sheet of 12-gauge steel behind his cabinet. Grant measured an 8-inch extension beyond the crack, added rounded corners, and marked bolt holes farther from the damaged fibers. Jonah watched his uncle work. Grant's movements were not rusty. He positioned the steel, checked the ground clamp, and lowered Darnell's old welding hood. The first arc flashed blue-white across the garage. The sound pulled something loose in Jonah's memory. Grant at the shop years ago, repairing a rolling cart. Walter standing behind him, saying the bead looked like toothpaste. Jonah had laughed. Grant had not. When the weld was complete, Darnell inspected it. "Still ugly," he said. "It's underneath." "That what you told yourself the first time?" Grant removed his gloves. "Dad told me." Darnell's grin faded. Jonah looked at the old strap welded to the new plate. "Why reuse it? Because it fits the mounting bracket. We could make a new bracket. We could also keep the part that worked." Grant rounded the corners at the grinder. Sparks streamed past his sleeves. Darnell leaned toward Jonah. "He was good. I can see that. Walter could too." That was the trouble. When Grant finished, he set the plate in the truck and went back for his coffee. Jonah asked, "Why did Grandpa tell everyone he saved the bench after the flood?" Grant wiped metal dust from his wrist. "Because it was his bench." "But you rebuilt it." "I also rebuilt the back stairs." "Nobody wrote a song?" "Did he thank you?" "He let me carve my initials." Jonah thought of GM under the rail. "That's it?" Grant looked toward Darnell, who had become fascinated by arranging wrenches. "I wanted to replace the wood base with steel," Grant said. "It would have been level, waterproof, adjustable. Dad said a steel base would turn it into a factory table." "Would it?" "Probably." A brief smile appeared. "I took a welding job because it paid twice what he could pay me," Grant said. "He called it quitting. I called it health insurance. We argued for 20 years and both pretended it was about furniture." Jonah rested one hand on the cold plate. "You did the same thing to me." "No. You worked an old man past what his body could handle. He wanted to work. So did you." Grant's voice sharpened. "You needed him to keep working, because if he stopped, the shop became yours before you were ready. And he needed you because you made him feel like he hadn't stopped being himself." Jonah looked away. Grant continued more quietly. "I blamed you for what scared me. That wasn't fair. Then you had me locked out. He had you locked out. You changed the locks. He asked me to. After you told him I was using him, I told him you were both lying to each other. And what did you tell him after? That he should call you." Jonah faced him. Grant's jaw tightened. "He said you'd come back when you were done punishing everybody." "He was wrong." "Yes." The garage heater clicked on. Darnell placed 3 wrenches in a drawer. "I'm too old to stand this quietly." Grant picked up the plate. "Then help us carry something." They returned to the shop before dawn. Marin sat on the workbench stool with 3 coffees and an expression of exhausted disgust. "You two went to Darnell's without telling me." "You were asleep," Grant said. "I was awake calling hospitals because neither of you answered." Jonah held up both hands. "No blood. Yet." They cut only the ruined fibers from beneath the bench, leaving the worn front edge and first dog hole intact. Jonah fitted a hard maple patch into the shallow pocket. Grant shaped the underside so the new steel plate carried pressure beyond the crack. They disagreed about every bolt. "Too close to the edge," Grant said. "It clears the patch. It loads the old wood. It's 2 inches from the split, 2 1/8. That's farther, not in the direction that matters." Marin drank coffee and watched them. "You sound exactly alike," she said. Both men ignored her. The plate went in at 7:30. Grant tightened the bolts in sequence while Jonah checked the top with a straight edge. The repaired corner sat 1/32 high. "Good enough?" Grant said. Jonah reached for a plane. Grant caught his wrist. "The patch will settle. It's high. It needs to be high." Jonah released the plane. They mounted the vise. The old wooden jaw bore a dozen dents, and one deep saw cut Walter blamed on Jonah, though Jonah had been in another state when it appeared. Grant turned the handle. The screw drew the jaw inward. Metal pressure traveled into the new plate. Nothing shifted. He tightened another quarter turn. The bench held. Jonah placed both palms on the top. The repaired corner was visibly changed underneath, but from above, the burns, scars, dog hole, and dark front edge remained. Grant picked up his jacket. You still have customer work. You're leaving? I have a meeting at 9. You were up all night. Some people endure professionally. Marin handed him the third coffee. He took it without looking at her. At the door, Jonah said, "Thank you." Grant stopped. "You did half," he said. "Still." Grant nodded once and left. Jonah slept for 40 minutes on a moving blanket while Marin answered calls. Then Celia's Wednesday became Wednesday again, and the settee returned to the bench. The repaired vise held its frame square. Celia inspected the finished arm that afternoon. She pressed each new spindle, sat carefully, then leaned her full weight against the repaired side. It doesn't move, it shouldn't. The new wood shows, it'll darken, so I've heard. She paid the $200 balance and added nothing. Jonah found himself relieved. The roll-top desk left Thursday evening. Its owner ran the tambour door up and down 6 times before signing the release. The repaired slats clicked once at the curve, then settled into their channel. By Friday morning, only one confirmed customer job remained. A hotel lobby chair with a curved arm Walter had removed before he died. The form required to shape its replacement was one of the wooden pieces Ruth's auction had nearly sold as firewood. Jonah fitted the new wood against it and tightened the repaired vise. Outside, Ruth's crew began setting up the rescheduled estate lots. Grant carried boxes toward the auction tables. Marin taped the final customer pickup schedule to the office window. The workshop held 2 kinds of ending now, each moving around the other. Jonah turned the vise handle. The bench did not groan, it simply held. Jonah loosened the vise and checked the arm against the old hotel chair. The curve was close, but the last 3 inches lifted away from the original by nearly a 1/4 inch. He had laminated 4 thin strips of ash over Walter's form, spreading glue between them and pulling the bundle down with clamps. The wood needed the night to accept its new shape. He added 1 more clamp. Behind him, Ruth's crew carried estate lots into neat rows. The room that Jonah had spent days returning to Walter's order became an auction floor again. Finished tables went near the front windows. Tools filled folding tables. Lumber scraps sat in numbered bundles. Ruth placed a yellow card on a wooden tray holding 3 marking gauges. Jonah looked over. "Those don't belong together. They do today. The rosewood one's a mortise gauge. Does that affect the sale? It affects the description." Ruth removed her glasses. "Do you want to write descriptions for 73 lots? No. Then today it's a pointy wooden measuring thing. It has 2 points. She amended the card. Grant passed carrying a box of cabinet hardware. "Don't encourage him." Ruth put her glasses back on. He was right. He'll put that on his headstone. Jonah checked the curve again. Grant set down the hardware. "Hotel manager still coming tomorrow? Lila Bennett, 4 o'clock. The auction starts at 10. I know. Ruth's crew needs the floor clear. The chairs in the finishing area. The finishing area is lot 71. Jonah looked toward the window. Walter's metal drying rack wore an auction card. "I'm using that. Until 10. The final coat won't be dry, then put it somewhere else." "Where?" Grant looked around as if space might appear through management. Marin came out of the office with a stack of releases. "The hotel chair can cure in there after we move the files." "Thank you," Jonah said. Grant picked up his box. "Nothing touches the walls." Marin waited until he walked away. "He's been saying that about everything. He likes walls. He paid to seal the back one. The estate paid." Grant covered the difference. Jonah glanced after him. "Why?" "Because the buyer would have delayed closing. He could have asked me." "With what money? That's not the point." "It's exactly the point." She handed Jonah the hotel estimate. Walter had charged $900 for rebuilding the loose frame, replacing the arm, and refinishing both front legs. Lila Bennett had paid $700. "Materials?" Marin asked. $130. "How many hours?" "I'm not billing hours. That wasn't the question." Jonah tightened the last clamp. "A lot." She wrote a lot in the margin. "Very professional," he said. "I learned from Brown, too." Late that afternoon, the laminated arm settled completely against the form. Jonah left it clamped and worked on the chair frame while the auction setup continued around him. The hotel chair was broad and low, upholstered in faded green leather. Walter had repaired its mate 2 years earlier. Jonah kept crossing the shop to compare the original arm with the finished chair. The bench made the copying possible. Walter's form fixed the curve. The dog holes held the frame at the proper angle. A row of pencil marks along the top showed where the mate's joints had landed. None of it was hidden. It had sat in plain view, while bidders called the forms scrap and the bench worn-out equipment. Lila Bennett arrived before closing. She was a tall woman in her 50s with dark hair tied at the nape of her neck. She managed the Marlton Hotel downtown, an old brick place whose lobby smelled of floor wax and burnt coffee. She examined the chair frame and the clamped arm. "That doesn't look like a chair," she said. "It will tomorrow." Walter said that in February. He was optimistic. He was late. That too. Lila touched the original arm on the mate. "These belonged to the hotel before I did. People sit in them while they wait for rooms, taxis, apologies. Mostly apologies? Depends on the weekend." Jonah showed her the new laminate and explained the color difference. "Will it hold?" "Yes." "Will it match?" "Eventually." "Everybody keeps telling me that about the carpet." She checked the estimate. "Marin says 200 remains." "Yes." "She also says you're losing money." "Marin says many things. She said that too." Lila set the paper down. "I won't pay more than Walter quoted. I'm not asking you to." "Good. He and I already argued about it." "You won?" "No one won arguments with Walter. They just ended because another person came in." She approved the work in progress and promised to return at 4. After Grant locked the building, Jonah stayed with Marin's key. He shaped the cured arm, cut its joints, and fitted it to the frame. At midnight, it sat square and solid. The new ash looked too pale. Jonah mixed stain under the bench lamp, testing it on offcuts. Walter's mate had ambered with age, its surface polished by thousands of waiting hands. Jonah could not manufacture that history, only keep the new piece from shouting. At 2, Marin returned carrying soup in a thermos. "You have a home," Jonah said. "So do you." "Room." "Then stop correcting people who are trying to insult you." She poured soup into the thermos lid. "Grant says the auction reserve will probably be lower than expected." "Because customer pieces were removed?" "Partly. The tools aren't bringing what he thought. They never do. He counted on the contents covering the roof, debt and auction expenses. The building sale covers it, and the medical bills and taxes and the line of credit Grandpa took against the shop." Jonah looked at her. "What line of credit?" "It paid operating costs." "How much?" "Not a fortune. Enough." "Why didn't anybody tell me?" "You weren't here." He set down the stain brush. Marin blew across the soup. "That wasn't punishment. You keep asking questions about a year you chose not to witness." "I was locked out. Of the shop." "I thought I was locked out of all of it." "You didn't test the door." He looked toward the repaired bench corner, steel hidden beneath maple. Marin held out the soup. "Eat." He took it. At 10 the next morning, Ruth began the rescheduled auction. Fewer bidders returned, but the room filled enough to heat beneath the July sun. Ruth acknowledged the postponement once, thanked everyone for their patience, and moved immediately into the lots. Jonah worked in the office with the door partly closed. He rubbed the final color coat onto the hotel chair's new arm, while Ruth's voice carried through the wall. 40, now 50. 50 where? 60. Walter's sharpening stones sold for $12. The dry cans of finish sold as a group to a man Jonah hoped owned gloves. The rolling rack went for 35. Every few minutes, Grant entered the office carrying another sold sticker, or asking whether Jonah needed to use something before it left. "The band clamps are next. Done with them." "Small rasps?" "Keep the half round out. It's in a lot. I need it for 10 minutes. Grant brought him the entire tray. Jonah selected the rasp, shaped the underside of the arm, then returned it before Ruth reached the lot. "Thank you," he said. Grant took the tray. "You're welcome." Neither added anything. At noon, Teresa Santoro arrived carrying another blue tin. She claimed she came to bid on a lamp, despite the fact that there were still no lamps. Darnell appeared 10 minutes later and purchased a box of turning blanks for $11 after arguing that Ruth's count was wrong. Eileen stood near the back eating a cookie from Teresa's tin. "This is a strange social event," Louise said beside Jonah. "You came. I'm protecting my investment. The bench isn't for sale. Your ability to pay me is." Louise had brought his box truck in case the auction ended with buyers needing delivery. He already had 3 jobs scheduled. "What are you doing with the bench?" he asked. "Moving it. An action, not a destination. I'll find one. You need power, ventilation, a loading door, and a floor that won't surrender. I know what a shop is. Do you?" Jonah looked through the office window. Ruth was selling Walter's remaining hand planes. Grant stood beside the clerk. Marin recorded totals at the desk. I don't need much room, Jonah said. The bench needs much room. Then I'll store it. Where? Jonah brushed another coat over the new arm. Luis let the silence answer. My office bay has moving blankets, dollies, and employees who drop sofas for a living. That bench would last 3 days. I didn't ask. I'm telling you before you do. At 2:30, the last lot sold. The auction total was lower than Grant's estimate. He did not announce the number, but Jonah saw it on the clerk's sheet when Marin carried the paperwork into the office. Grant leaned against the empty file cabinet. After fees, we cover the roof balance and most of the line of credit, he said. Most? Marin asked. I'll handle the rest. With what? The building proceeds. That belongs to both of us. It belongs to the estate until the debts are paid. Jonah cleaned his brush at the sink. Grant watched him. You don't have to pretend not to hear. I'm staying out of it. That's new, Marin said. The room fell silent. Then Ruth appeared in the doorway. Jonah, when that chair's done, I have 3 pieces in my warehouse that need estimates. Grant straightened. Jonah said, What kind of pieces? Table with a split pedestal, walnut cabinet missing trim, church pew, somebody shortened badly. I don't have a shop. I didn't ask what you don't have. You need them soon? I need honest estimates. If I approve them, I pay half up front and half on completion. Grant looked at Ruth. You're offering him work? I am describing work. Here, the building closes. I know the building closes. Ruth turned to Jonah. Call me when you know where to receive delivery. She left before he could accept or refuse. Marin looked at him. That's good. It's 3 estimates. It's 3 more pieces than you had yesterday. It's nowhere to put them. Grant checked the wall clock. Hotel manager comes in an hour. Jonah applied the final protective coat to the chair arm. It would be ready to handle carefully by 4, though it would need days to cure fully. Lila arrived at 3:55. She sat in the chair before Jonah could tell her not to. The repaired frame held. The new arm did not flex beneath her palm. It's lighter, she said. It'll darken. So I hear. She smiled and paid the balance. Luis loaded the chair into his truck for delivery. Lila signed the final customer release, and Marin drew a line through the last name on her schedule. The shop was empty except for sold lots awaiting pickup, family members, and Jonah's workbench. Ruth's crew folded the auction tables. Grant swept around clean rectangles left by furniture. Marin removed the customer schedule from the office window. The clock ticked above them. Everything has to be out by noon tomorrow, Grant said. Luis looked at Jonah. Everything? Grant's gaze settled on the bench. Especially that. Jonah rested one hand on the repaired maple corner. He had bought it back. He had repaired it. He had no place in the world where it could go. Luis broke the silence by kicking one of the temporary casters. This one still doesn't turn. It never turned, Jonah said. You rolled it in here. It objected the whole way. We need a destination before we debate the wheel. Marin folded the customer schedule into quarters. What about Darnell's garage? Too small, Jonah said. Andy uses it. A storage unit? No power. No ventilation. Grant leaned the broom against the wall. You could store the top separately. I'm not taking it apart. You may have to for the door. It came through that door assembled, with 6 auction employees. Luis counted the people remaining. We have 4 adults and 1 Grant. Grant looked at him. Your personality weighs extra. From the loading dock came Eileen's voice. I have a place. She stood outside holding Teresa's blue tin and a framed print she had bought for $12. The print showed a sailboat losing an argument with a storm. Jonah walked over. A place for what? The bench. Unless you're planning to sleep on it too. How long have you been standing there? Long enough to hear Grant become a separate species. Luis pointed at her. Still like her. Behind Park's restaurant stood a low cinder block annex Eileen had once used for catering storage. Its wide garage door opened onto an alley shared with a florist and a plumbing company. Inside were 2 stainless steel prep tables, empty shelves, and a walk-in refrigerator that had not worked since the previous winter. The concrete floor sloped toward a drain. Power ran along both walls. A utility sink occupied one corner beneath a sign reading, "Employees must wash hands," as if the room expected employees to materialize. Jonah walked the perimeter. How big? 840 square feet, Eileen said. You know exactly. I pay taxes exactly. Luis opened the garage door and looked at the alley. My truck fits. Barely, Eileen said. Barely is a moving company term for beautifully. Jonah checked the outlets. What did you store here? Catering equipment. Then we stopped catering because customers believe a buffet means they've purchased the right to keep you until midnight. What do you want for it? $800 a month. Jonah laughed. Eileen did not. I can't pay that. I know. Then why show me? She looked at Luis. You need storage. Luis rubbed his chin. Depends how much. 400 for the rear half, 400 for the front. Jonah said, that's still 400. You understand division? I don't have a deposit. 1 month, not 2. I don't have that either. You made money this week. I paid rent and materials, then make more. Jonah looked around the annex. It was not charming. The ceiling showed water stains around an old vent. The garage door rattled, and the sink faucets were labeled backward. It was still more shop than he had expected to see. What about insurance? He asked. Required. Heat? You want heat too? In Pennsylvania, eventually. Space heater. You pay electric. Luis paced off the rear section. I can store blankets and dollies along that wall. Stage small deliveries here. We'd need a line on the floor. No red tape, Jonah said. Fine. Blue. Eileen held out a key, month to month. You damage the building, you fix it. You block my deliveries, I put your bench in the alley. This isn't charity? Jonah asked. No, charity is less paperwork. Why 800? Because that's what the florist offered before deciding the alley was haunted. Luis looked outside. Is it? Not on weekdays. Jonah did not take the key. He could hear Grant in his head listing everything that could fail. Rent, insurance, utilities, material costs, customers who wanted history preserved but prices held still. Ruth had offered estimates, not guaranteed work. The motel company could stop calling. Luis could need the whole bay. Eileen could decide furniture dust did not belong behind a restaurant. The old shop had made him believe belonging was something another person could revoke. Eileen lowered the key. You can say no. I know, do you? Jonah looked at the utility sink, the loading door, and the open floor where the bench could stand. Give me until tomorrow. You have until noon. That's not time. It's a deadline. You've proven you like those. The bench had to be out by noon regardless. They returned to Mercer Furniture Repair in Luis's box truck. Marin sat between Jonah and Luis in the cab, holding the sailboat print, because Eileen had forgotten it in the annex. Are you going to take the space? She asked. I don't know. You need somewhere for Ruth's pieces. She might reject the estimates. She might not. 400 a month plus insurance. That isn't unusual. It is when you have $73. Luis glanced over. 73? After gas. You owe me $356.50. I remember the 50 cents. Marin said, you can use some of the customer balances. No, those belong to the estate, not the payments for work you completed. We haven't decided that. I decided it. Grant didn't. Grant isn't the only representative. Jonah looked at her. You'd pay me out of Grandpa's estate? I'd pay the person who completed contracted work. If that offends your grief, invoice us while frowning. How much? After materials, $580. Luis nodded. Rent, deposit, and $20 toward your crushing debt. Jonah looked out the window. Marin shifted the sailboat on her lap. You aren't taking an inheritance. I know. You look like you'd prefer one. I would have preferred the bench. You bought it. That isn't what I mean. I know. At the old shop, Grant had removed the painted Mercer sign from above the front windows. It rested against the brick inside the loading door, 6 feet long. The words honest work faded nearly white. Jonah stopped beside it. The buyer wants exterior signage down before final inspection, Grant said. What happens to it? Not part of the building sale. Was it in the auction? No. Why not? Grant picked up one end. Because Marin told Ruth to leave it off. Marin set down Eileen's print. It wasn't worth anything. The sign was warped, peeling, and punctured by rusted screw holes. Jonah nodded. Right. Grant looked toward the workbench. How are we moving it? Luis backed the box truck to the loading door. Grant had brought 4 lengths of steel pipe from his garage to use as rollers. They jacked the bench high enough to remove the useless casters, then lowered its feet onto the pipes. The first roller traveled smoothly until it reached the threshold. "Stop," Grant said. Louise stopped. Jonah crouched beside the repaired corner. "It's clear? The rear leg isn't. It has an inch. It needs 2. You said it would fit." "I said the top would fit." Marin leaned over the truck ramp. "Would everybody like to discuss this for 6 months?" They raised the rear leg, shifted the roller, and tried again. The bench crossed the threshold without touching the jamb. Its weight moved from the old concrete floor to the steel ramp, then into the truck. Jonah walked beside the repaired vise with one hand beneath it, though the new plate was stronger than anything else on the bench. Inside the truck, Grant strapped it against the forward wall. Jonah watched him pull the ratchet tight. "I shouldn't have used the vise," he said. "No, I knew better." "Yes." "You could make the apology easier." Grant checked the strap. "It wasn't about the vise." Jonah waited. Grant fed the loose end through the buckle. "Dad was wrong to tell you to leave that way. He was sick. He was still responsible for his words. So were you." "Yes." The agreement left Jonah with nowhere to push. Grant rested one hand on the bench top. "I thought if I made the shop inaccessible, you'd go home, cool down, and call him. I thought if he wanted me, he'd unlock it. He thought if you cared, you'd come to the house. Marin thought I'd ruin the funeral. I thought you might." "From the ramp," Marin said. "I'm standing here." Grant glanced at her. "You were probably right, too." Jonah looked at the initials beneath the lower rail. GMMMJM. "We made it very easy for each other to stay angry," he said. Grant tightened the strap once more. Mercer's value efficiency. They loaded the sign last. At the annex, Eileen waited beside the open garage door with a printed lease and 3 pens. Jonah read every line. Louise read the first page and asked whether ghosts counted as subtenants. Marin corrected the utility percentage in the margin. Grant inspected the overhead door track. "It's loose," he said. Eileen pointed to the lease. "Tenant repairs." Jonah looked at Grant. "Don't." "I didn't offer." "You were about to." "I was identifying a condition." "He's going to repair it," Eileen told Jonah. Grant frowned. "What makes you think that?" "You looked at it twice." Jonah signed. Louise signed. They divided the deposit. Marin gave Jonah an estate check for his completed labor, along with a breakdown showing every customer balance and material expense. The numbers left no room for sentiment. After the deposit, insurance binder, and his payment to Louise, Jonah had less than $100 again. Louise studied the $20 bill Jonah handed him. "You really took my suggestion. You said 20. I was not negotiating. I owe $336.50. You forgot tax. Die waiting." They rolled the bench into the front half of the annex. Jonah chose a place near the windows, then changed his mind because the light would hit finished surfaces unevenly. He moved it closer to the center, aligned with the loading door, and far enough from the sink to avoid another flood. When they lowered its feet to the concrete, the bench rocked. Grant crouched and checked the floor. "Slopes. It has a drain," Jonah said. "You need a shim." Marin picked up Walter's short walnut runner from the box of bench pieces. The word "short" remained penciled at one end. "This finally useful?" she asked. Jonah took it from her. He could have cut it into a shim. Instead, he placed it in the top drawer. "I have maple scraps." Grant found one and planed a wedge by hand. Jonah tapped it beneath the left rear foot until the bench stood solid. Ruth delivered her 3 pieces that week. She rejected Jonah's first estimate for the split pedestal. "Too low," she said. "You said honest. Honest includes labor." He rewrote it. She approved 2 jobs, declined the church pew, and paid half up front on the others. The work did not become easy. Jonah kept 2 motel shifts a week. The annex was hot in the afternoon, cold before sunrise, and loud whenever Luis rolled dollies across his half. Sawdust drifted beneath the blue tape dividing their spaces. Eileen complained twice and then hired Jonah to repair 2 restaurant booths at his regular rate. Marin came on Tuesday evenings to manage invoices. She refused the title of bookkeeper because she had another job and because Jonah paid in meatball sandwiches. Grant repaired the garage door track without admitting Eileen had predicted it. He returned later with steel brackets for the Mercer sign. They hung it above the interior loading door, where the warped board leaned away from the wall in one corner. "Looks crooked," Grant said. "It was always crooked," Jonah replied. Marin stepped back. "Honest work needs repainting." "No," Jonah said. They both looked at him. Not yet. Grant folded the ladder and left it against the wall. Your name, too. What? You asked whether you could use Mercer. I didn't ask. You spent 12 days asking. Jonah looked at the sign. I'm not taking it from you, he said. Grant's face shifted just slightly. You couldn't, he replied. It's my name. Marin set the invoice box on the bench. Mine too. No one said Walters. They did not need to. Jonah opened his pocket knife and crouched beneath the repaired corner. On the lower rail, his old initials remained shallow and uneven from the night he had carved them, while pretending not to be drunk. He added a second JM beneath the new maple patch. Grant watched. You're already on there. That one was Grandpa's shop. And this one? Jonah closed the knife. Marin placed a new brass key on the bench between them. This one locks from both sides, she said. Try not to misunderstand it. Jonah picked it up. Grant turned off the loading light. Marin took the empty coffee cups. They left together, arguing about whether the sign needed another bracket. At the door, Marin looked back. Lock up when you're done. Jonah glanced at the cabinet Ruth had delivered, held square in the repaired vise. Old maple surrounded the new steel plate. The short runner waited in the drawer. His family's initials ran beneath his hands. I will, he said. This time, when the work was finished, the key was his.